Hi, my name is Shirley, and I'm a 31-year-old office worker. A year ago, I married a man named Mason. We met on a blind date, and after dating for a year and a half, he proposed. I had always dreamed of settling down, so even though it felt a bit rushed, I accepted his proposal. But now looking back, I realize I should have been more careful. Soon after our wedding, Mason suddenly decided to change jobs. I was surprised and asked him why he made such a quick decision. He said his previous job didn't let him fully use his skills. What shocked me even more was that he had already quit and would be leaving his job at the end of the month. Luckily, he found a new job quickly, but it paid less than his old one. At first, I wasn't too worried because I was also working. But then Mason started pressuring me to quit my job. I might have considered it if his new salary was enough for both of us, but with his recent job change, his income was lower, and he kept saying it would go up soon without knowing when. Quitting my job under these uncertain financial conditions seemed risky. We needed my income to keep saving money and cover our basic expenses like rent and car payments. It just wasn't practical to rely only on Mason's salary. One evening, Mason handed me divorce papers, trying to scare me. "You know I'm ready for this whenever," he said. I told him to calm down and think about what he was saying, but he just walked away to his room. This argument made me reflect on how quickly things had changed since I met Mason. I told him I wouldn't quit my job until his salary improved. He seemed to accept this at first, but he kept bringing it up again and again. Whenever he asked, "When are you going to quit?" I gave him the same firm answer. Now, a year into our marriage, his salary still hadn't increased, and he continued to pressure me about quitting my job. Sometimes I wanted to respond sarcastically, but I held back, knowing our financial stability depended on my income. If quitting my job was so important to him, I felt he should focus on advancing his career to earn more. As time went on, I started to understand why Mason was so insistent on me leaving my job. It became clear during our visits to his parents' house. Whenever we were with his mother, Martha, Mason would act concerned and say he wanted to make her life easier. Martha would thank him, and Mason would look at me like he was trying to nudge me into quitting. He suggested that his mother needed help, but Martha was perfectly fine. She was healthy, active, and even worked a part-time job that supported her hobbies and social life. She didn't need me to take care of her, but Mason kept pushing the idea. "If only one of us were home during the day, we could check on Mom daily," he said out of nowhere. It seemed he imagined me visiting Martha every day, which felt unnecessary and overwhelming. I asked him directly what he expected me to do since Martha was perfectly capable on her own. Mason listed small tasks like helping with housework or running errands. It was clear he had ideas about how I could contribute, but none of them seemed to justify me giving up my career. This constant cycle of requests and explanations was exhausting. I needed Mason to understand that while I was happy to support his family when needed, quitting my job without a good reason was not something I could easily agree to. After all, Martha had her part-time job and spent most of her days out with friends. I pointed out to Mason that when he suggested I handle the housework during the day, his response left me baffled. Was he really implying that I should become his mother's maid? Mason was always very concerned about maintaining a certain image, especially in front of his parents. If he was so eager to take care of them, why didn't he handle the household chores himself? Despite his insistence, I stood firm in my decision not to quit my job. I also chose not to visit my in-laws on my days off, although I made an effort to see them during major holidays like New Year's. During our visits, I noticed a pattern. Mason often delegated tasks to me. He'd ask me to tidy up, assist his mom, or run errands. I resisted these requests. When he suggested I go to the store, I would respond, "Don't you know this area better than I do?" His reply was always the same, that it wouldn't look right if he did it himself. I found this reasoning both confusing and manipulative. It seemed like he was more interested in controlling the situation and projecting an image of caring for his family than actually caring for them, or for me. Over time, my view of Mason began to change. It seemed like he was more concerned with appearances than with real affection or respect for me. When I finally confronted him, asking why he didn't help out more or even quit his job to take care of his mother, his reaction spoke volumes. He looked disgusted and uncomfortable, saying, "That's not something I'm supposed to do. I'm giving you these instructions so my mom will think you're a considerate, useful wife. You should realize how kind I'm being to you." His words revealed a lot. He wanted to dump all the hard work on me while making himself look good, as if he was doing something extraordinary. But I'm not his servant, and I don't deserve to be treated with disrespect, especially in front of my in-laws. It became clear to me that Mason's priorities were completely skewed. He cared more about appearances than about having a genuine partnership and supporting each other. If Mason keeps making these unreasonable demands, I won't stay quiet. I'll stand up for myself. Despite many discussions, Mason hasn't changed. He constantly pesters me with the same old question. "Are you going to quit your job?" Every time we visit my in-laws, he continues to boss me around just as he always has. I finally reached my limit. I decided it was crucial to have a serious conversation with him. We need to talk about our future, I said, hoping to steer our conversation in a constructive direction. What are you even trying to say? Mason retorted, clearly annoyed. I'm honestly fed up, I replied. I'm tired of you constantly asking me when I'll quit my job, and I'm exhausted from you pressuring me to take care of Martha. I laid out my concerns to Mason. Why are you fed up with that? You're my wife, and it's your duty to care for your husband's parents, Mason argued. Don't you think that's a huge responsibility to place solely on me? Shouldn't you, as their biological child, be responsible for helping with the housework and taking care of your parents in the first place? I challenged his outdated views. No way, it's the wife's duty to do it. Are you the kind of person who doesn't care about family? Mason accused, clearly upset by my resistance. I'm disappointed to hear you say that, he added. Sensing an opportunity to expose the double standard, I asked, then let me ask you this. How have you been taking care of my parents? If I asked you to care for my parents, would you do it? Mason looked at me blankly, unable to see the parallel. What are you saying? Why should a husband take care of his wife's parents? So does that mean you won't take care of my parents now or ever? I pressed, trying to highlight his inconsistency. Husband's parents and wife's parents are completely different, Mason replied, missing the point. What difference does that make? I don't get it, I said, feeling frustrated. I didn't realize you were so clueless. It's like talking to my old boss, I continued, dismayed by his lack of understanding. What are you saying? Mason asked, confused. I'm saying that both sets of parents should be important, and we should take care of each other's families, I replied, emphasizing the importance of mutual support and equality in our responsibilities. So you only prioritize your own family by blood? I'm so disappointed in you, I exclaimed. I won't be visiting your parents anymore. Why would you do that? Enough is enough. I'm the one who wants you to stop this nonsense, I retorted. No way. How dare you talk back like that? My mom is right. Mason shot back, his temper flaring. Mom was talking about you. She said you're a badly behaved wife. That's why she gave me this. Mason pulled out a piece of paper from his bag. It was divorce papers. What? You already had divorce papers ready? I was shocked, but Mason seemed oddly proud. See? I scared you, didn't I? I'm prepared for this anytime, so think about what you just said, Mason declared smugly before storming off to his room. Unbelievable. Why is Mason so selfish? That look of triumph on his face, it's clear the divorce papers are just a threat to make me obey him. The fact that Martha was involved made me even more suspicious. Mason is acting like a puppet for his mom, trying to control me while following her orders. It's ridiculous. I won't let Mason have his way. How can he not see that our marriage is in trouble when he acts like this? His lack of understanding just annoys me more. Mason had already completed the divorce papers and had them signed with witnesses, including Martha and his friends. This meant I could sign and file them whenever I chose. The next day after Mason went to work, I filled out the divorce papers and submitted them to the city office. As a precaution, I also filed a notice of non-acceptance of the marriage certificate. I called my parents and explained the situation, knowing Mason might try to file the marriage certificate on his own. When my parents learned that I had prepared the divorce papers, they were initially shocked but fully supported my decision. Outraged by Mason's behavior, they immediately offered to help me move my belongings. Taking leave from work, I had my parents come over, and we relocated all my things to their house while Mason was away. I decided to stay with my parents for a while. It was the first time in a long time that I felt truly comfortable and at ease in their home. Reflecting on my marriage, it became clear that Mason never contributed his fair share to our household chores. I was the one cooking dinner after long work days and handling all the cleaning and laundry on my days off. On top of that, he expected me to also care for his parents, which was just not feasible. That evening, Mason called me, probably just back from work. Hello? Hey, where are you right now? I told Mason, I'm at my parents' house. He sounded surprised and annoyed. Why would you go back there without my permission? Where's all your stuff? Don't tell me you were staying the night, he questioned, not realizing the seriousness of the situation. He seemed to think I was just staying over, not that I had moved out for good. I'm not coming back, I said firmly. What are you talking about? Come back here and make me some food, he demanded. Make it yourself, I replied before ending the call. I couldn't discuss divorce with him if he kept acting so dismissive, so I decided to block his number and wait for him to show up at my parents' house. A week later, Mason arrived at my parents' home with his parents. They'd all looked serious as we sat down in the living room. It was 3 against 3. How could you leave without my permission? Mason demanded, his voice full of disbelief and accusation. You were treating me like a housekeeper, Mason. All I ever asked was that you take care of your family responsibilities, I said, standing my ground. That's not true. What kind of wife am I if I don't take care of Mason? Martha, his mom, gave me a fierce glare. My father started to get angry, but I quickly spoke up. Mason told me to quit my job and take care of Martha, claiming it was my duty as his wife. Yet when it comes to my own family, he expects me to handle everything alone. Ultimately, Mason wants obedience and uses me to care for his parents while taking credit for it. That's why he prioritizes his parents over mine. Martha continued to glare, but Mason's father, Liam, looked confused, as if he hadn't known about this. "Let me clear the air," Mason said, suddenly blaming the idea of divorce on his mother. "Why would you suggest that?" Liam asked, surprised. "Oh no, it's because Camila has an attitude problem," Martha stammered. "And did you say that my parents aren't a priority?" I pressed. "Well, it's only natural that your parents come first," Martha replied defensively. "Don't be absurd. I came here to support you after hearing about the unfair treatment Camila endured, but now it seems you're the one at fault. Don't hide behind her parents' authority to get your way," Liam said, making Mason visibly shrink in his seat. Liam then apologized to me and my parents. "I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by my foolish son. I will have a serious talk with him." "Liam, you're not to blame, so please don't apologize," I replied. "Thank you for your kind words, but there's something else I need to say." I turned to Mason, who looked nervous. "The divorce papers you gave me, I've already filed them. We're no longer married." Mason and Martha both turned pale. "Why did you file them without my permission?" Mason demanded, shocked. "You told me I could file them whenever I wanted. Besides, you had already filled out your part and had Martha sign as a witness," I calmly explained, but Mason was clearly at a loss for words. Seeing the tension, Liam, furious, intervened. "Mason, you used divorce as a threat?" he exclaimed, and unable to contain his anger, he slapped Mason across the face. Martha, witnessing this, was visibly shaken. Liam turned to me and apologized sincerely. "I apologize deeply that you had to witness this. You have every right to divorce this fool. On behalf of Mason, I'm truly sorry for the damage done to your marriage," he said, tightening his grip on Mason's collar as he demanded apologies from both Mason and Martha before ushering them out of the house. Later, I thanked Liam for his intervention. He assured me that all of Mason's assets and property were transferred to me without any hassle, given my higher income and the effort I had put into managing our household. It was a relief to secure everything from our marriage. I later found out that Liam had divorced Martha, clearly disgusted by her actions. One day I ran into a colleague from Mason's old workplace who shared some surprising news. Mason had not been performing well at his job and often received harsh criticism from his boss. In defiance, Mason resigned and switched jobs, which only added to my frustration with him. Rather than taking responsibility for his shortcomings, he blamed others, which likely contributed to his lower pay at the new job. Now I'm relieved to have left him. I've rented a cozy apartment and am enjoying living independently. Work is going smoothly, and I even received a recent raise. Currently, I'm not interested in relationships and prefer to focus on my career. Mason always cared more about appearances than actual abilities. He maintained a facade at home but failed to improve professionally. Sadly, many spouses use divorce threats as leverage, thinking it gives them power, but it's a big mistake. I hope they realize their folly and find happiness alone. Meanwhile, I'm grateful to have moved on from Mason and look forward to meeting someone special in the future when I'm ready.
"Get away from my son, you psycho bitch!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, placing myself between Candace and Caleb. Her eyes were wide and crazed, hands outstretched as if to snatch him away from me. Caleb clung to my leg, whimpering in fear. "Mommy, I don't want to go with the mean lady." Candace's perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. "He's my nephew. I'll take him whenever I want." Her diamond-encrusted fingers closed into fists. This wasn't the first time my sister-in-law had tried to force her way into my life and make decisions about my child, but her behavior was becoming more unhinged by the day. "You're delusional, Candace. Caleb is terrified of you." I pulled my son closer, glaring at the woman I once naively considered family. Candace opened her mouth to retort, but the sound of a car door slamming outside cut her off. "Candace, what's going on?" My brother Marcus's voice preceded him through the front door. "Oh, Marcus, thank God you're here." Candace instantly transformed into the picture of a devoted wife. "Your insane sister is keeping my nephew from me again." I wanted to scream at the blatant lie, but Marcus turned his stern gaze on me before I could speak. "Really, Raina? Candace has every right to see Caleb. She barged in here ranting like a lunatic." I shot back, unwilling to back down. "Ask Caleb what she did." "Duh," Candace scoffed loudly. "Please, we both know that boy will just repeat whatever lies his trashy mother tells him." The venom in her voice shouldn't have surprised me, yet the insult still felt like a slap across the face. Candace had been looking down on me and my lower-class existence for years. Marcus sighed heavily. "We're not doing this again, you two. Candace, let's go home." "But Marcus," she began to protest. "Now," he stated with finality, shooting me a disapproving glare before leading his wife out. As the door slammed behind them, I finally released the breath I'd been holding. Caleb was still trembling against me. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, smoothing his hair. "The mean lady is gone now. For today, at least." But deep down, I knew this war with Candace was just beginning. The next morning, I tried to shake off the previous day's events as I got Caleb ready for school. He was uncharacteristically quiet, his usual endless stream of chatter replaced by nervous glances towards the front door. "You don't need to worry, sweetie," I assured him, packing his Spider-Man lunchbox. "Candace isn't allowed to take you from me." Caleb nodded slowly, but his brow remained furrowed. At 6 years old, he'd already experienced too much of his aunt's volatility. My thoughts drifted to my older brother Marcus as I drove Caleb to elementary school. How could he continue enabling Candace's increasingly disturbing behavior? Then again, he'd always been blind to her faults. I remembered when they first started dating in college. Even then, Candace's obsession with status and wealth was on full display. She'd relentlessly mock my second-hand wardrobe, her perfectly plucked eyebrows raised in judgmental disdain. "You'd look so much prettier if you put in a little effort, Raina," she'd sneer with a cruel smirk. "Marcus deserves a real woman, not some dowdy charity case." I grit my teeth, gripping the steering wheel tighter. All these years later, and her elitist taunts still stung. Candace came from an obscenely rich family, born with a silver spoon in her mouth. She took perverse pleasure in reminding me that I'd never be in her social stratosphere. After graduation, Marcus landed a high-paying corporate job, and Candace wasted no time locking him down in marriage. I'd never seen two people more mismatched joined together in supposed holy matrimony. Marcus was so blinded by Candace's looks and the lure of her family's money that he ignored all the red flags: her explosive temper, irrational jealousy, and unsettling mood swings. I tried warning him, but he brushed it off as bridal stress. Shaking my head, I pulled into the school drop-off loop and gave Caleb a reassuring hug. "Have a great day, okay? Don't let mean Aunt Candace ruin it for you." He nodded again, forcing a small smile before heading inside. My heart ached for him. Caleb was such a sweet, gentle boy. He didn't deserve to be subjected to Candace's toxic behavior. As I drove home, my mind raced with memories of the countless times Candace had belittled and mocked me over the years. Her cruelty only intensified after Caleb was born, as if she couldn't stand sharing Marcus's attention and affection. I pulled into my driveway, gripping the steering wheel as flashes of yesterday's confrontation replayed in my mind. The way Candace's eyes had bulged with deranged entitlement as she tried to take my son. Her venomous insults about me being trashy. Something had to be done about her accelerating mental instability before she did real harm. I was tired of being her emotional punching bag. If Marcus refused to see the truth about his wife, I'd make him open his eyes, one way or another. That evening, my parents came over for their weekly family dinner. As I set the table, I could hear Caleb chattering away in the living room, no doubt regaling them with tales from first grade. "Raina, is everything okay, honey?" my mom asked with a concerned frown as she entered the kitchen. Caleb mentioned something about Candace showing up yesterday. I sighed heavily, recounting the unhinged confrontation to my horrified parents. Dad's brow furrowed deeper with each detail. "That woman is completely unstable," he finally said, shaking his head. "I've been telling Marcus for years that she needs professional help." "Well, he's made it quite clear he doesn't want to hear it," I replied bitterly. "He's so obsessed with maintaining their perfect life that he refuses to see Candace for who she really is." Mom reached out and gave my arm a comforting squeeze. "You can't reason with delusional people, sweetheart. All you can do is protect yourself and Caleb." I managed a tight smile, deeply grateful for their unconditional support. At least my family could see Candace's toxicity for what it was. An hour later, we were all seated around the dining table, enjoying the meal I'd prepared. Caleb's endless chatter filled the room, putting me at ease as it always did. That is, until the doorbell rang. I immediately tensed, a knot forming in my stomach, Please, not here. Not now. I'll get it, Dad offered gruffly, kissing the top of Mom's head before heading to the front door. Seconds later, the unmistakable sound of Candace's shrill voice reached my ears. Well, if it isn't the low-class family reunion, she crowed with a derisive laugh as she pushed past Dad into the dining room. My blood immediately began to boil at the insult directed at my parents. Candace, however, seemed utterly unfazed by her rude behavior as usual. What an absolute dump you live in, Raina, she continued, wrinkling her surgically enhanced nose as she surveyed my modest home. I guess beggars can't be choosers, though. You have a lot of nerve showing your face here after yesterday. I managed through gritted teeth. Candace simply rolled her eyes. Please don't act so victimized. I'm here to spend quality time with my nephew, like any good aunt would want. Over my dead body, I shot back vehemently. In the blink of an eye, Candace's demeanor shifted. Her icy glare landed directly on Caleb, who shrank back in his chair. Well, well, if it isn't the little liar himself, she hissed, taking a menacing step towards him. That was the final straw. Get out of my house! I yelled, placing myself between her and my petrified son. This isn't over, Raina, Candace snarled as Dad ushered her towards the door. Not by a long shot. The venom in her parting words sent a chill down my spine. In that moment, I knew this conflict had escalated to a dangerous new level. There would be no more neutrality. It was us, or her. A few weeks later, the annual Baxter family birthday bash for Marcus rolled around. Despite my parents' protests, I decided to attend, if only to keep an eye on Candace's unhinged behavior around Caleb. The party was held at Marcus and Candace's ostentatious mansion, because of course it was. As I pulled up to the circular driveway lined with impeccably trimmed hedges, I felt grossly underdressed in my modest sundress and flats. The other guests' designer labels and dripping jewels made me self-conscious. Just ignore them, sweetie, I told Caleb as I walked him inside, already bracing myself for Candace's inevitable insults about my appearance. Sure enough, as soon as we entered the lavishly decorated living room, her shrill voice cut through the crowd. Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence. Cinderella herself. A trill of mocking laughter followed from the cluster of identically coiffed women surrounding her, all clutching boutique shopping bags. I felt my cheeks flush as their judging eyes raked over my simple outfit. Nice of you to take a break from scrubbing floors, Raina, Candace continued, sauntering over with a wicked grin. I almost didn't recognize you without your rags on. Swallowing hard, I fought the urge to hurl my drink in her smug face. I couldn't let her get a rise out of me, not in front of all these strangers. Caleb clutched my hand tighter, sensing the tension. Happy birthday, Marcus, I forced myself to say as my brother approached, hoping he'd run interference before things escalated. Thanks for coming, he replied stiffly. With a resigned sigh, he turned to Candace. Do you have to start with her already? It's supposed to be my day. Oh, I'm just having a bit of harmless fun. Candace responded with a dismissive hair toss. Raina knows I'm joking, don't you, sis? The venom in her syrupy tone made my skin crawl. I opened my mouth to protest, but Marcus cut me off. You know how Candace gets. Just ignore her. He pulled me into an awkward side hug, his eyes pleading for me not to make a scene. Grinding my molars, I managed a terse nod. I'd been putting up with Candace's jokes for over a decade. What was one more night of torture for Marcus's sake? As the party stretched on, Candace's digs grew increasingly more pointed and more audible. She'd pause meaningfully whenever I walked past, her cronies stifling snickers behind monogrammed clutches. Finally, it was time for Marcus to open gifts. Candace, of course, had to make a grand spectacle of her lavish present. Here you are, birthday boy, she trilled, placing a small box wrapped in shimmering paper into his hands. I can't wait to see your face. Marcus obliged, tearing off the wrapping to reveal a sleek designer watch, likely worth more than my entire yearly salary. It's beautiful, babe, he murmured, pulling Candace in for a kiss as their sycophantic audience cooed. I felt a pang in my chest as I watched them, wondering if I'd ever find someone who could love me like that. My gaze drifted down to the modest little gift bag in my hands, filled with a few inexpensive golf accessories I knew Marcus would appreciate. Well, Raina? Candace's shrill voice shattered my thoughts. Don't you have something for the birthday boy, too? All eyes turned towards me. Feeling my cheeks burn, I hesitantly stepped forward and handed Marcus the gift bag, mumbling a quiet, "Happy birthday." "Wow, how generous," Candace snarked loudly as he pulled out the mundane golf balls and tees. "I'm sure he'll just cherish that dollar store junk forever." The room's judgmental silence was deafening. Tears of humiliation stung my eyes as I avoided Marcus's pitying gaze, wishing I could simply melt into the floor. Clutching Caleb's hand, I turned and fled from the room, Candace's jeering laughter echoing in my ears. As I reached the front door, one thought crystallized in my mind with cold, hard clarity. This had gone on for far too long. It was time to make that wretched woman pay. The humiliation from Marcus's birthday party hung over me like a dark cloud for days afterward. I couldn't shake the memory of Candace's mocking laughter, the disdainful glances from her vapid socialite friends. I knew I should have been used to her cruelty by now. But having my modest gift so publicly ridiculed in front of my own brother stung more than I cared to admit. As I dropped Caleb off at school one morning, I found myself gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. That smug, heartless woman had gone too far this time. Something had to be done. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the passenger door opening. I turned to see my mom climbing into the car, a look of grim determination on her face. "Good, you're still here," she said without preamble. "We need to talk about Candace." I felt myself tense instinctively at the mention of her name. "What about her?" "Raina, this has gone on for far too long," Mom stated, her tone broking no argument. "The way she treated you at Marcus's party was the final straw for me." Swallowing hard, I slowly nodded in agreement. "I know. Believe me, I know. That woman is unhinged," Mom continued, her voice lowering to a fierce whisper. "Her behavior isn't normal, sweetie. It's becoming dangerous." My chest tightened as disturbing images of Candace's crazed eyes flashed through my mind from our last confrontation. "You're right. I'm just so afraid of what she's capable of, especially around Caleb." Mom reached over and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Which is why we can't just sit back and let her keep terrorizing this family. It's time we take a stand." Her determined words ignited something inside me, a spark of righteous indignation I hadn't felt in years. She was absolutely right. I'd been a passive victim of Candace's abuse for far too long, all in the name of keeping the peace with Marcus. But after her deplorable display at the party, something inside me had shifted. The gloves were finally coming off. "You're right, Mom," I said, feeling a surge of courage course through me. "I'm done being Candace's personal punching bag. It's time to fight back." A small smile played across Mom's lips, and I could have sworn I detected a hint of pride in her eyes. "That's my girl. So, what's the plan?" As I began mapping out my first steps towards revenge, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. No more cowering in fear, no more turning the other cheek. This was war, and I didn't intend to lose. "Well, for starters, we need to open Marcus's eyes to who Candace really is," I declared, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "He's been blindly defending her for too long." Mom arched an eyebrow. "You know your brother better than anyone. What will it take for him to finally see the truth?" A muscle twitched in my jaw as I considered her question. I knew exposing Candace's mental instability to Marcus would be an uphill battle. But this time, I was ready to fight with everything I had. "Don't worry," I stated with finality. "I have a few ideas to make him wake up and smell the venom. Candace wants a war?" A hard smile crossed my lips. She's about to get one. The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake with a start. My heart pounded as I sat upright in bed, straining to hear any other noise over the thundering of blood in my ears. Then, a piercing scream shattered the eerie silence. "Caleb!" I gasped, cold dread seizing my body as I recognized my son's terrified cry. Throwing off the covers, I raced down the hallway towards his bedroom, half blinded by panic. As I threw open the door, a chilling sight stopped me dead in my tracks. Caleb cowered in the corner, his little body trembling uncontrollably as shards of broken glass and splintered wood littered the floor around him. The window had been completely shattered, tiny razor-sharp shards glittering in the moonlight like deadly confetti. Mommy," he whimpered between ragged sobs, eyes wide with fear. In that moment, I didn't think I'd ever seen him look so small and vulnerable. "It's okay, baby. I'm here. I managed to force out, my voice shaking as I scooped him up protectively in my arms. He clung to me like a lifeline, his tears soaking through my nightshirt. Rocking him gently, I scanned the wreckage of his room with mounting horror. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. It was a targeted attack. But by who? And why would anyone want to hurt my sweet little boy? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, driving the air from my lungs. There was only one person unhinged enough to do something this twisted: Candace. As the weight of her depravity sank in, a cold fury began replacing the fear coursing through my veins. That sadistic bitch had gone way too far this time. Putting her jealous hands on me was one thing, but threatening the life of my child? That was unforgivable, unthinkable, inexcusable. "Shh, it's going to be okay," I whispered fiercely into Caleb's hair, hugging him even tighter. I would get to the bottom of this, and make damn sure Candace paid for whatever she'd done, even if it was the last thing I ever did. The next few hours passed by in a blur of police questioning and cleaning up the shattered glass. I must have recounted the same details a dozen times, desperately trying to piece together any clues that could implicate Candace. Marcus showed up at some point, his usual slicked-back hair disheveled as he embraced us both. "Thank God you two are all right," he murmured shakily. "Who would do something like this?" I opened my mouth, ready to unleash all my pent-up rage and suspicion about his twisted wife, but the words never came. One look at Caleb's red-rimmed eyes and trembling lips, and I knew I couldn't put him through that emotional trauma again. Not tonight. So instead, I forced a tight smile and lied through my teeth. "I have no idea. Some punk kid's playing a sick prank, I guess." Marcus sighed heavily, scrubbing a hand down his face. "Jesus, what is this world coming to?" He pulled us both in for a fierce hug, oblivious to the fact that the real monster was much closer than he realized. As his strong arms enveloped us, I caught a whiff of Candace's sickly sweet perfume lingering on his shirt. A chilling reminder that I was anything but safe, even within this embrace. Meeting my son's haunted gaze over Marcus's shoulder, a hard knot of determination formed in the pit of my stomach. Whoever was responsible for this attack was going to pay dearly. If it really was Candace behind this twisted act, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because I wasn't just going to expose her malicious lies to Marcus, I was going to utterly destroy her. In the weeks following the attack on Caleb's room, I became a woman possessed. Every waking moment was consumed by the burning desire to make Candace pay for what she'd done. I knew in my bones she was behind it, even if I didn't have concrete proof yet. The smashed window, the threatening message it sent, it reeked of her pathological mind games and escalating instability. She was unraveling and lashing out in increasingly dangerous ways. But this time, I was ready. I'd been pushed to my limit one too many times by that sadistic woman. No more turning the other cheek, no more playing the victim. It was time to fight fire with fire. I started documenting every vindictive slight, every backhanded insult Candace had ever hurled my way over the years. Scouring my emails, texts, even old social media posts, I meticulously compiled evidence of her toxic behavior and disturbing obsession with me. A paper trail that revealed a clear pattern of derangement. I also began carefully cataloging any eyewitness accounts from friends and family who'd been subjected to her outbursts and mood swings. My parents were able to recount dozens of incidents, as were some of Marcus's more clear-eyed coworkers. With each new data point I uncovered, a damning portrait began to take shape. One of a deeply troubled woman whose envy towards me had mutated into a full-blown mental disorder. Someone for whom no attack was off limits in order to satiate her twisted need for vengeance. Someone who, if left unchecked, could easily snap again and place Caleb's life in danger. That thought alone was enough to fuel my crusade, no matter how underhanded or invasive my tactics became. I started documenting Candace's daily routines, combing her social media for any clues about her deteriorating state of mind. I even went as far as staking out her weekly Pilates class, determined to catch her in the act of an unhinged outburst. I knew Marcus would never believe any of it without proof, hard evidence that he couldn't simply dismiss or rationalize away. His loyalty to his wife was that strong, that blind. But I was going to shatter that delusion once and for all, no matter how much it devastated him. Because in the end, exposing Candace's true nature was the only way I could ensure Caleb's safety. She'd taken her twisted games too far, and I was the only one willing to stop her reign of terror. As I pored over the incriminating materials late one night, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. I had her. I finally, truly had her. The paper trail didn't lie. It showed a clear, undeniable pattern of mental illness that even Marcus couldn't ignore. Leaning back in my chair, I couldn't resist the hard smile that crept across my face. Candace had been drunk on her wealth and privilege for far too long, blind to consequences. She'd alienated and attacked everyone around her in her downward spiral, leaving behind a wake of destruction. Well, now it was time to reap what she'd sown. The old saying about karma was true. It really was a bitch, and Candace was about to feel its full wrath. I just hoped Marcus could find it in himself to forgive me when this was all over. Taking down his deranged wife would devastate him, but it was a necessary evil to protect my son. My family. No matter how much collateral damage it caused, I knew one thing for certain. Candace's world was about to come crashing down around her, and I was going to be the one swinging the wrecking ball. It was the night of Candace's weekly book club meeting at her mansion. The perfect opportunity to catch her alone and finally unleash the bombshell I'd been meticulously assembling for weeks. As I pulled up to the imposing iron gates, my heart was pounding with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, when I could shatter her delusional world once and for all. Clutching the bulging manila envelope filled with documented proof of her mental illness, I took a steadying breath before ringing the call box. Seconds later, Candace's saccharine voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes? Who is it?" "It's me," I replied flatly. "We need to talk." There was a pregnant pause before the gate swung open with a metallic groan. I could practically hear the sneer in her tone as she responded. Well, to what do I owe this pleasure?" Gripping the envelope tightly, I steeled myself and strode up the long, winding driveway towards the looming house. Candace was already waiting in the doorway, arms crossed and chin raised in a silent challenge as I approached. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here, Raina," she said coldly as I mounted the front steps. "After that despicable stunt you pulled with Marcus last week?" "Can it, Candace?" I cut her off, taking a small vindictive pleasure in her look of shock. "We both know why I'm really here." Her icy glare narrowed suspiciously. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Wordlessly, I thrust the overstuffed envelope into her hands, my jaw clenched tightly. "See for yourself." Keeping one wary eye trained on me, Candace flipped open the envelope and began rifling through the stack of documents and photos inside. I watched in tense silence as her perfectly arched eyebrows slowly knit together, lips pursing tighter and tighter with each damning page. "What is this?" she finally hissed, whipping her venomous glare back up to me. "Some pathetic attempt at blackmail?" I shook my head, feeling a grim smile tug at the corners of my mouth. "Not blackmail, Candace. The truth." Her eyes widened fractionally as she seemed to realize the full implications of what she was looking at. I could see the panic starting to set in as the evidence mounted, a clear, undeniable pattern of unhinged behavior, obsessive jealousy, and severe mental issues. "You deranged little bitch," she spat, cheeks flushing crimson with rage as she hurled the papers at my feet. "You think this proves anything? Marcus would never believe your insane lies." "Oh, I don't think he'll need much convincing once he sees all this," I countered coolly, gesturing to the scattered documents. "Not after the little message you sent Caleb a few weeks ago." Her face drained of color at my pointed reference to the night she'd shattered my son's bedroom window. For a brief moment, she seemed to teeter on the edge of losing her carefully constructed composure entirely. But just as quickly, her mask of indignant fury slammed back into place. "You have no proof," she snarled, taking a menacing step towards me. "This is all just sad, pathetic conjecture on your part, a desperate ploy for attention, as always." I held my ground, locking eyes with her as I delivered my parting words with cold finality. "That's what you think, Candace. But pretty soon, Marcus is going to see the truth. He's going to see what a deranged, twisted shell of a human being he married." I paused, letting the weight of my promise sink in. "And when he does, your precious life of wealth and privilege is going to come crumbling down around you." Her face contorted in a mask of pure unrestrained hatred. "You'll regret this, Raina. She seethed through gritted teeth. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed." Turning on my heel, I left her seething on the doorstep and headed back towards my car, each step lighter than the last. I knew there would be hell to pay for my actions in the coming days, but I didn't care. The wheels were finally in motion. Candace's downfall was inevitable, and nothing would stop me from watching her world burn. I could feel the anger boiling inside me as I listened to the lewd sounds coming through Brent's phone speaker. My husband's deep, throaty groans intermingled with the unmistakable high-pitched gasps of a woman who definitely wasn't me. "Oh, Brent, you feel so good," the woman purred, her voice dripping with lust. I wanted to smash the phone against the wall, but I forced myself to remain still and silent, clutching the device tightly as waves of nausea washed over me. When the call finally ended, I took a deep, shuddering breath, fighting back tears. How could he do this to me, to our family? After 15 years of marriage and giving him everything, this was how he repaid my devotion? The lies, the business trips, the unexplained credit card charges, it all made sense now. My heart pounded with a mixture of rage and devastation as I confronted the harsh reality. Brent was having an affair. I spent the rest of that night pacing restlessly, my mind racing as I replayed the sordid conversation over and over. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to scream and hurl accusations. But the other part knew I needed to stay calm, to gather evidence before he inevitably denied everything. When Brent finally returned home 2 days later, I steeled myself, forcing a tight-lipped smile as he bounded through the door with his usual charisma. "Hey, babe, I missed you." He pulled me into an embrace, his aftershave filling my nostrils and making me gag silently. I returned the hug stiffly, all the while imagining wrapping my hands around his lying throat and squeezing until his deceptive tongue lolled out. "Everything okay?" he asked, sensing my tension. His concerned facade only fueled my fury. "Just tired?" I lied smoothly, mirroring the ease with which he'd clearly been deceiving me. "Welcome home." As he headed upstairs to shower, I felt a surge of resolve coursing through me. I would uncover every sordid detail of Brent's betrayal. And when I did, he would face the consequences, severe, brutal consequences, for shattering the sacred vows he had sworn to me. Brent's carefree whistling echoed down the stairwell, but I heard only the faint rumblings of karma's approach, slowly gathering like an inescapable storm on the horizon. I took a deep breath and steeled myself before entering the living room. Phone in hand with the damning recording queued up, Brent was lounging on the couch, idly flipping through channels. "We need to talk," I stated firmly. He glanced up with a bemused expression. "What's up, babe?" Rather than answering, I hit play on the audio file. The unmistakable sounds of his aroused groans and the mystery woman's breathy moans filled the air. Brent's face drained of color as the recording played. When it finished, I fixed him with a cold stare. "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" He opened and closed his mouth wordlessly for a moment, before regaining his composure. "Candace, that was just a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that was a one-time slip-up?" Brent rose from the couch, hands raised placatingly. "Baby, I swear, it was nothing but a drunken fling during that conference in Phoenix. It'll never happen again." "Don't lie to me," I shouted, nostrils flaring. "I know about the hotel receipts, the suspicious credit card charges. How long has this been going on?" He shook his head vehemently. "No, you've got it all wrong." "Save it," I cut him off, feeling disgusted. "I can't even look at you right now." Turning on my heel, I stormed out of the room, slamming the door to the guest bedroom behind me. I collapsed onto the bed, hot tears of anger and humiliation streaming down my cheeks. How dare he try to gaslight me, to make me feel crazy for catching him red-handed? My body shook with rage at the thought of all the lies, all the times he had smiled in my face while carrying on a tawdry affair behind my back. But I refused to be the victim anymore. I would expose Brent for the unfaithful snake that he was, gathering undeniable proof to shove in his smug face. Over the next few weeks, I documented everything, poring over bank statements, installing tracking software on his phone and computer, even hiring a private investigator to follow his movements. The evidence mounted rapidly. Hotel receipts, incriminating emails and texts, even video footage of him kissing and groping the woman, who I learned was his co-worker Amber, in a dimly lit parking garage. When I finally amassed the extensive file, I waited until Brent was home from another one of his frequent business trips. Dylan was spending the night at a friend's, giving us privacy. "We're through," I stated coldly, tossing the thick manila envelope onto the coffee table in front of Brent. "I know everything." His eyes went wide as he flipped through the photos, videos, documents, and other proof within. "Candace, I can explain." I held up a hand, silencing him. "Save your breath. The lies stop now." For the first time, Brent seemed to realize I wasn't bluffing or exaggerating. The smug mask slipped, revealing the cowering coward underneath. What are you going to do?" he asked meekly. A vindictive smile crossed my lips as I leaned back in my chair. "Don't you worry," I purred darkly. "You're about to face some severe consequences." Despite the mountain of evidence I had gathered proving his infidelity, Brent continued to deny and downplay his affair with Amber. Lie after shameless lie poured from his mouth as he desperately tried to gaslight me into doubting the truth right in front of my eyes. "It was just a fling, a stupid mistake," he would claim, as if that absolved him of betraying his marriage vows. Other times he would insist, "We're just friends. There's nothing going on." I wanted to scream at the blatant falsehoods. How dare he treat me like an imbecile after I had caught him red-handed? Part of me was tempted to leak the evidence online for the world to see, to utterly humiliate him. But I held back, knowing I needed to bide my time for the perfect moment to strike. In the meantime, I began compiling an even more extensive file on Brent's misdeeds. I installed hidden cameras and microphones around the house, recording his every move. Our teenage son Dylan even helped, using his tech skills to hack into Brent's emails and messaging apps. "I can't believe Dad would do this," Dylan said sadly one day after uncovering yet another explicit exchange between Brent and his mistress. I pulled my son into a tight hug, my heart breaking for the disillusionment he was experiencing at such a young age. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way," I told him gently. "But we can't let your father's lies tear this family apart. We have to fight back." Dylan nodded resolutely. "Don't worry, Mom. We're going to take that cheating scumbag down." With my son's help, the file on Brent's indiscretions grew thicker by the day. Incriminating photos, videos, emails, credit card statements, we collected it all, documenting his every transgression in preparation to obliterate his life. But still, Brent persisted in lying through his teeth whenever I confronted him, doubling down on his fabrications with almost sociopathic ease. "You're being paranoid and crazy," he would snap whenever I tried to reason with him. "There's no one else. You're imagining things." The gaslighting was maddening, making me question my own sanity at times despite the overwhelming proof I possessed. How could someone I had loved and trusted for so long deceive me so callously? The final straw came at Brent's family reunion over 4th of July weekend. As we mingled with his relatives at the backyard barbecue, I watched in horrified disgust as he blatantly flirted with Amber right in front of me, his wandering hands leaving no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Rage boiled in my veins as I stormed over and shoved him away from the smirking woman. "Get your hands off my husband, you home-wrecking whore!" I shouted, the vicious words ripping from my throat before I could stop them. Brent tried to defuse the situation, laughing it off as a misunderstanding to his oblivious family members. But I was done playing his game. Grabbing the thick file from my purse, I flung it down on the picnic table, photos and documents spilling out, displaying the lurid evidence for all to see. "Take a good look, everyone," I spat venomously, whirling on my astonished in-laws. "This is the kind of man your son really is, a lying, cheating scumbag who's been having an affair with this woman for over a year." Pandemonium erupted as Brent's relatives gasped and shouted in shock and anger. But I didn't care. I was past the point of protecting him or preserving his pristine reputation. He had made his bed, and now it was time to lie in it, no matter how publicly humiliating the consequences would be. The backyard erupted into chaos as I exposed Brent's sordid affair to his entire family. His parents and siblings recoiled in shock and disgust, gawking at the incriminating photos and documents strewn across the picnic table. "How could you, Brent?" his mother wailed, burying her face in her hands. "After everything your father and I did for you." Brent's dad shook his head slowly, a look of utter revulsion on his weathered face. "You're a disgrace, son. I didn't raise you to be this kind of man." But Brent didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He simply sneered at me with contempt blazing in his eyes. "You crazy bitch," he snarled, spit flying from his lips. "You're going to regret this." Before anyone could react, he lunged across the table and grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanking me towards him until our faces were mere inches apart. The stench of beer and barbecue sauce wafted from his mouth as he hissed, "You think you've won? This isn't over." I stared defiantly into his crazed eyes, refusing to show fear despite my heart thundering in my chest. "I'm done with your lies, Brent. Our marriage is over, and so are you." Dylan suddenly appeared, shoving his father away from me with surprising force. "Get your hands off her!" he shouted, positioning himself protectively in front of me. Brent stumbled backwards, nearly toppling the table with the evidence in his drunken rage. Amber was at his side in an instant, clinging to his arm. "Come on, baby, let's get out of here," she crooned, shooting me a smug look over her shoulder. A chorus of outraged shouts and insults followed them as they stormed away. Brent's brother Chris stepped towards me, shaking his head in disbelief. "I'm so sorry, Candace," he murmured, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "If we had known, this is unforgivable." I nodded mutely, fighting back tears as the gravity of the situation hit me. My life as I knew it was over, but it was a life built on lies and deceit anyway. As much as it hurt, I knew I was doing the right thing. In the days that followed, the rest of Brent's family reached out in turn to express their shock and lend their support. Even his own parents, initially defensive of their son, came to realize the extent of his betrayal as they pored over the damning proof I had gathered. "We had no idea he was capable of such depravity," Brent's mother told me, her voice laced with a heartbroken waver. "You didn't deserve any of this." I accepted their apologies stoically, appreciative of their kindness, yet numb to offering any absolution for Brent's actions. As far as I was concerned, he had committed the ultimate sin by breaking his sacred vows, and he would pay dearly for it. True to his vile nature, Brent remained utterly unrepentant in the aftermath of his exposure, attempting to gaslight and manipulate me into doubting the truth yet again. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," he claimed during one heated argument, his arrogance infuriating. "It was just a fling, it's not that serious." I could barely contain my fury as I hurled his words back in his face. "Not that serious? You disrespected me, your family, our entire marriage vows, all for some cheap fling with a woman you couldn't even be faithful to." Brent's eyes narrowed to slits as he stepped towards me, his body tensed with menace. "You'll regret this," he growled, each word dripping with venom. "I'm going to make you suffer for humiliating me like this." But I refused to be intimidated by his empty threats any longer. I had the truth on my side now, along with his own flesh and blood, who had disowned him for his disgusting misdeeds. "No, Brent," I replied coldly, staring him down with flinching. "The only one suffering will be you. I'm going to destroy every single part of your pathetic life, and I'm going to make sure you deserve every agonizing second of it." After the explosive confrontation at Brent's family reunion, there was no going back. The bridges had been burned, the truth laid bare for all to see. His parents disowned him, his siblings wanted nothing to do with him, even his own flesh and blood had turned their backs in utter disgust. But Brent didn't seem fazed by the fallout. If anything, he seemed to revel in the chaos, lashing out with bitter vitriol and doubling down on his reprehensible behavior. "They're all a bunch of self-righteous hypocrites." He sneered when I informed him that his parents were cutting him off financially. "I don't need their money or their fake love." His callousness was appalling, devoid of any remorse for the devastation he had wrought. It became increasingly clear that appealing to his humanity was a fruitless endeavor. He simply had none left. As the divorce proceedings began, Brent fought me viciously on every front, determined to make me suffer, even as the world crumbled around him. He drained our joint accounts, attempted to hide assets, and even leveled false accusations in an effort to turn our son Dylan against me. "Your mother's a lying, vindictive snake," he hissed, after I caught him trying to manipulate Dylan. "Don't let her turn you against your own father." But Dylan wasn't having any of it. Now 17, he had witnessed firsthand the depths of Brent's depravity and betrayal. If anything, it had strengthened the bond between my son and I, a united front against his father's toxic influence. "I don't know who you are anymore, Dad," Dylan said sadly, shaking his head. "But I want no part of this ugliness." With each despicable act, each pathetic attempt to drag us all down with him, my rage toward Brent calcified into an icy, simmering hatred. I found myself obsessively strategizing, plotting out every move to obliterate him, financially, socially, psychologically. It became my singular driving force, a all-consuming quest to make him feel even an ounce of the pain and humiliation he had inflicted upon me and our family. Brent's smug arrogance would be his undoing. I would savor every moment of stripping that away as he lost everything. When the judge ultimately ruled in my favor, awarding me the house and primary custody of Dylan, Brent remained defiant, even as his life crumbled around him. "This isn't over, you psychotic bitch," he snarled, spittle flying as he was led away by the bailiffs. "I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me." His threats might have once filled me with dread, but now I simply laughed in his bloated, twisted face. "Regret?" I called out mockingly. "I'm just getting started, Brent. This is only the beginning of what you deserve." And I meant every word. Exposing his lies and driving away his family and friends was just the opening salvo. I had so much more in store for the man who had so callously shattered the sacred vows between us. As I watched him being dragged away, I felt a savage sense of satisfaction, of karma being served, however cruelly. This was precisely what he deserved after the turmoil and devastation he had wrought with his selfish actions. Turning away, I wrapped an arm around Dylan's shoulders, the two of us standing united against the storm Brent had unleashed through his sins. There would be no remorse, no looking back. Only the total and complete obliteration of the man who had dared to betray our family's trust in the most unforgivable way. Whatever revenge lay ahead, he had more than earned every agonizing second of it. With the divorce finalized and Brent out of our home, I could finally turn my full attention to systematically dismantling every aspect of his miserable life. He thought he had been through hell already? He had no idea what fresh agonies awaited him. My first target was his career at the prestigious corporate firm where he had been employed for over a decade. Brent had always taken immense pride in his position and paycheck, lording his success over others as proof of his importance. Well, it was time to strip that arrogance away once and for all. Utilizing the evidence I had gathered of his affair with Amber, I compiled a comprehensive file documenting how he had been neglecting his duties and misusing company resources to facilitate his indiscretions. Explicit photos, video recordings, emails, all of it, tallying up the sordid details of his unprofessional conduct. I also enlisted the aid of an old friend, a skilled hacker who owed me a favor, to covertly access the company's internal communications and HR files. With his help, I was able to insert the incriminating dossier directly into their systems, ensuring it would be found. Within a week, the firm's CEO himself was calling Brent into his office, the file of evidence splayed out on the desk between them. "What is the meaning of this, Brent?" The CEO's voice could be heard saying sternly over the recording I had my hacker obtain. "This is utterly unacceptable behavior for one of our senior executives. Sir, I can explain." Brent stuttered, suddenly sounding very small. "Explain what?" the CEO interrupted sharply. "These photos, videos, all this proof of you carrying on illicit affairs and neglecting your responsibilities, using company property for your indecent trysts?" There was a pause, and I could practically see Brent squirming in discomfort. Good. Let him feel just an ounce of the shame and humiliation he deserved. "You're fired, effective immediately," the CEO stated, his voice laced with finality and disgust. "Security will escort you off the premises. I want you gone within the hour." The recording clicked off, and I felt a savage surge of satisfaction. That high-paying job, that status and sense of self-worth Brent derived from his career, all of it gone in an instant because of his own reprehensible actions. But I wasn't done by any means. No, this was just the start of his downfall. Next, I recruited Dylan's help to release the entire file across Brent's social media accounts and professional networking sites like LinkedIn. Within hours, the lurid details of his infidelity went viral as outraged friends, family, and colleagues shared and reacted in shock and horror. Amber's husband even reached out, thanking me profusely after discovering the truth about his wife's tawdry dalliances. Their divorce proceedings began immediately. As for Brent, his phone was blowing up constantly with anguished texts and voice messages from all corners of his life. Parents disowning him, friends cutting ties, colleagues aghast at his indecent behavior. In one particularly satisfying instance, I patched his mother's tearful tirade onto the house speakers so we could both savor every blistering second of it. "You were my pride and joy," the woman wept brokenly. "But now, you're nothing to me, nothing but a filthy, immoral disappointment." I could see it all clicking into place for Brent in that moment. The total and complete ruination I had meticulously orchestrated. His entire world was crumbling into ashes before his very eyes. When he finally looked up at me with naked fear and loathing, I simply smiled. "Like I told you before," I said calmly, "this is only the beginning of what you deserve." With Brent's career, reputation, and family ties in ruins, I turned my sights to obliterating what little he had left, his finances and assets. He would be left with nothing, forced to start from less than zero after the hell I put him through. It began with liquidating our joint accounts and investment portfolios that I had access to through our marriage. Hundreds of thousands of dollars drained in a matter of days, transferred discreetly to offshore holdings where he could never trace it. "What did you do?" Brent demanded frantically when he realized our nest egg was gone. "Where's all our money?" I simply smiled placidly. "Considering how I earned every penny of that while you were gallivanting with your whores, I'd say it's finders keepers." His face purpled with rage, but I was prepared for his outburst. With a flick of my wrist, I produced a crisp manila envelope, a dossier detailing every single asset in his name that I intended to systematically demolish. "This is just a taste of what's coming for you," I said coolly. "You're going to lose it all by the time I'm through." True to my word, I deployed every underhanded tactic in the book to unravel the few holdings Brent had managed to siphon away and hide from me. With Dylan's tech-savvy assistance, we relentlessly hacked and probed until we discovered every last possession he tried to salt away. The classic '68 Mustang he had lovingly restored? Reported as a stolen vehicle until it was seized. The private investment funds he had stashed overseas? Drained away by my hacker contacts until not a cent remained. Even the house he tried to rent after being forced from our marital home. I made sure the landlord received an anonymous tip that Brent was an adulterer of the worst kind. He was kicked out within a month. With each successive blow I landed, stripping away his assets and driving him towards bankruptcy, the fight seemed to gradually drain from Brent's body. What was once a sneering, arrogant puffery became a hunched, haggard shell of a man. He would call or text me at all hours, devolving from bitter threats to pathetic pleadings as his life crumbled around him. "Candace, please?" He sobbed one night during a tear-filled voicemail. "I'm so sorry for what I did. You have to stop this. I have nothing left. I'll be destitute." I listened to the message impassively before deleting it without a shred of remorse. Brent's suffering was a calculated, perfectly engineered campaign, and it was nowhere near finished. When his car was finally repossessed and his cell phone cut off for lack of payment, he started showing up at my doorstep, begging to be let inside. "I have nowhere to go," he wailed, pounding on the door with gnarly fists. "You've taken everything from me. Why are you doing this?" I watched him through the security camera, taking perverse satisfaction in his total and complete debasement. This was the great Brent Connors, the corporate hotshot and arrogant cheater, reduced to a sniveling, desperate husk. When Dylan emerged from his room to see what the commotion was, I waved him off. "Don't bother," I told my son calmly. "He's just reaping what he's sown. That's all." My final salvo came in the form of a massive data dump to the IRS. Records upon records of Brent's financial misdeeds from tax evasion to money laundering. Within days, the authorities were at his ramshackle motel room with warrants and cuffs. The sight of his utter humiliation as they hauled him away almost made the entire grueling process worth it. Almost. Months passed as the full weight of my revenge campaign against Brent took hold. With each day that went by, he plummeted further into the abyss of destitution and ruin I had meticulously constructed. The corporate job, the money, the family, the home, it had all been systematically stripped away through my calculated efforts. Even his freedom was temporarily revoked after that IRS raid, though his high-priced lawyers managed to get the charges reduced to a slap on the wrist. But it didn't matter. The damage was already done. Brent was a shell of his former arrogant self, having lost every single thing that had once brought him swagger and self-worth. I savored every agonizing second as the proud, selfish man who had so callously shattered his marriage vows was ground down into broken submission. This was karma's bitter reward for his sins against me and our family. Dylan and I, meanwhile, were finally able to start fresh without the toxic weight of Brent's betrayal dragging us down. With my revenge complete and his own misdeeds having alienated him from everyone he knew, he was officially expunged from our lives like the cancer he was. We moved from our old home into a new place, a clean slate for just the two of us to begin rebuilding. Dylan seemed to thrive without his father's negative influence, excelling in school and landing a prestigious internship in software engineering. As for me, I had never felt more liberated and vindicated. The rage that had fueled my quest for vengeance had burned itself out, leaving only a sense of tranquility and peace in its wake. That is, until the incessant phone calls and unwanted visits began. At first, Brent's attempts to reach out were easy enough to ignore. Drunken voicemails pleading for mercy or hurling bitter curses that he had brought upon himself. I would simply delete the messages without a second thought. But then he started showing up in person, loitering outside our new home, or accosting us in public with his disheveled, haunted appearance. Each time I saw that sunken, desperate look in his rheumy eyes, any lingering pity I might have felt quickly evaporated. "I have nothing left because of you," he sobbed during one such confrontation outside the grocery store. "You've destroyed me completely." Grabbing my arm with shocking force, Brent stared at me with an almost feral desperation. "Please, give me another chance," he begged hoarsely. "I'll do anything, Candace. Anything to get my life back." I could feel Dylan tense beside me, ready to intervene, but I simply wrenched my arm free of Brent's grasp and stared at him with utter contempt. "Your life?" I spat out a bitter laugh. "This is exactly what you deserve after throwing away the life we had for some cheap fling. You did this to yourself." Brent opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off with a savage glare. "I gave you chance after chance to come clean, to make things right," I said, voice low and laced with venom. "But you just couldn't stop lying and cheating, could you? You chose this path, and I made sure you suffered every agonizing step of the way." Straightening up, I turned and began walking back towards the car where Dylan waited, leaving Brent crumpled on the sidewalk like the pathetic, broken shell of a man he had become. As we drove off, I felt an immense weight finally lift from my shoulders. The long, arduous road towards justice and reclaiming my life had finally reached its conclusion. Brent was neutralized, relegated to a cautionary tale of how swiftly karma can dismantle even the proudest of narcissists. I looked over at Dylan, my strong, resilient son, and smiled. We had each other, and that was enough to forge ahead into our new chapter, free of Brent's toxicity at long last. No more looking back, only moving forward, towards the fresh start this long-overdue vengeance had afforded us. "If you ever lay a hand on me again, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life." The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and rage as I stared into the cold, unforgiving eyes of my husband, Derek. His fist clenched at his side, knuckles white with fury, and for a moment I thought he might strike me again. But then a twisted smile spread across his lips, and he let out a low, menacing chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. "You think you can threaten me, Mallory?" he spat, taking a step closer. "You're nothing without me. You'd be lost, alone, and penniless if it weren't for my generosity." I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill down my cheeks. This wasn't the first time Derek had lashed out at me, but it was the first time I dared to stand up to him. For too long, I'd been trapped in this gilded cage, blinded by the illusion of the perfect life we'd built together. From the outside, we were the picture of success. a powerful business mogul and his doting wife, raising our beautiful daughter Ava in a sprawling mansion in the heart of the city. But behind closed doors, Derek's true nature revealed itself, a toxic blend of manipulation and control that had slowly isolated me from my friends and family. "I'm warning you, Derek," I said, my voice quivering despite my best efforts to sound strong. "If you ever touch me or Ava again, I'll leave, and I'll make sure you never find us." His eyes narrowed, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of fear cross his features. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that familiar smirk that made my skin crawl. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, closing the distance between us. "You're mine, Mallory, and if you ever try to leave, I'll make sure you regret it." With that, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. I sank to the floor, my body racked with sobs as the reality of my situation crashed down around me. I had to get out. For Ava's sake, and for my own. But how? Derek had made it clear that he wouldn't let us go without a fight, and I knew firsthand how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. As the tears streamed down my face, I silently vowed to find a way. No matter what it took, I would break free from Derek's grip and build a life for Ava and myself, far away from his toxic influence. It was time to stop living in fear and take back control of my life. The next few days were a blur of tension and unease. Derek's outburst had shaken me to my core, but I knew I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to act, for Ava's sake, if not my own. As I went about my daily routine, I found myself constantly on edge, jumping at every sound, every movement in my peripheral vision. Derek, for his part, seemed to revel in my discomfort, shooting me smug glances whenever our paths crossed. "Mom, are you okay?" Ava asked one evening as we sat down for dinner, her brow furrowed with concern. "You've been acting really weird lately." I forced a smile, reaching across the table to give her hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little stressed at work, that's all." Derek scoffed, shaking his head. "Your mother's always been a worrier, Ava. It's nothing new." His words cut deep, but I bit my tongue, unwilling to provoke another confrontation in front of our daughter. Instead, I turned my attention back to Ava, determined to keep our conversation light and casual. But as the days wore on, it became increasingly difficult to maintain the facade. Derek's verbal jabs grew more frequent, more pointed, and I found myself constantly on the defensive, struggling to keep my composure. It all came to a head one night after Ava had gone to bed. Derek and I were alone in the living room, and he wasted no time in launching into another tirade. "You think you're so high and mighty, don't you?" he sneered, his words slurred from the countless glasses of scotch he'd downed. "You think you're better than me, but you're nothing without my money and my name." "That's not true," I protested, my voice trembling. "I've worked just as hard as you have to build this life for our family." He let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head. "You're delusional, Mallory. You're nothing but a pretty face, a trophy wife to hang on my arm and make me look good." Before I could react, he was on his feet, towering over me with a look of pure rage twisting his features. "Maybe I need to remind you of your place," he growled, raising his hand as if to strike me. I flinched, bracing myself for the blow, but it never came. Instead, Derek stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance as he glared at me with a mixture of contempt and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "You're pathetic," he spat, turning on his heel and storming out of the room, leaving me shaken and wondering how much longer I could endure this living hell. As I sat there in the silence, my mind raced, trying to make sense of the turmoil that had become my life. I knew I had to get out, but the thought of leaving filled me with a paralyzing fear. What if Derek found us? What if he made good on his threats? I jumped as my phone buzzed, pulling me from my dark thoughts. It was a text from Samantha, my best friend and the only person I trusted enough to confide in. "Are you okay? I have a bad feeling about Derek. Please tell me you're safe." Tears stung my eyes as I read her words, a wave of relief washing over me. Samantha had always been my rock, my voice of reason in the darkest of times. Maybe, just maybe, she could help me find the strength to break free. With trembling fingers, I typed out a response. "I need your help." Samantha's arrival was like a breath of fresh air. As soon as she stepped through the door, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the tension that had been coiling inside me for weeks finally beginning to unravel. "Oh, honey?" she murmured, pulling me into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry you've been going through this alone." I clung to her, fighting back tears as the floodgates threatened to open. "I don't know what to do, Sam. He's become so volatile, so unpredictable. I'm scared for Ava and myself." She pulled back, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "You're going to leave him. That's what you're going to do." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Leave Derek? The thought had crossed my mind more times than I could count, but the fear of his retaliation had always held me back. "I can't," I whispered, shaking my head. "You know how vindictive he can be. If I try to leave, he'll make our lives a living hell." Samantha's grip on my shoulders tightened, her gaze unwavering. "Mallory, listen to me. You are stronger than this. You have to be strong, for Ava's sake, if not your own. Derek is a monster, and you can't let him control you any longer." Her words struck a chord deep within me, igniting a spark of defiance that I thought had long since been extinguished. She was right. I couldn't let Derek continue to hold this power over me, over our family. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll leave him." Samantha's face broke into a relieved smile, and she pulled me into another fierce hug. "Thank God. We'll figure this out, Mal. I promise. You and Ava are going to be safe." Over the next few days, we hatched our plan. Samantha helped me open a secret bank account, squirreling away as much money as I could without arousing Derek's suspicion. We researched safe houses, potential places we could go to start over, far away from his reach. All the while, I walked on eggshells around Derek, careful not to give him any inkling of my intentions. But the strain was starting to show, and he grew increasingly suspicious of my behavior. "What's going on with you lately?" he demanded one night, cornering me in the kitchen. "You've been acting strange, distant." I forced a smile, willing my hands not to tremble. "It's nothing, Derek. I've just been stressed with work, that's all." His eyes narrowed and he took a step closer, backing me against the counter. "Don't lie to me, Mallory. I know when you're hiding something." My heart pounded in my chest as he leaned in, his breath hot on my face. "If I find out you're up to something, you'll regret it. Do you understand?" I nodded mutely, too terrified to speak. Derek held my gaze for a few more agonizing seconds before turning and stalking out of the room, leaving me shaken to my core. As soon as he was gone, I sank to the floor, burying my face in my hands as the sobs racked my body. How much longer could I keep this up? How much longer before Derek saw through my lies and unleashed his fury upon us? I knew then that I had to act fast. Our lives depended on it. It all came crashing down one fateful night. I should have been more careful, more vigilant, but in my desperation to gather enough funds for our escape, I grew careless. I had just returned from a clandestine meeting with Samantha, slipping the latest cash withdrawal into the hidden compartment in my closet, when I heard the unmistakable sound of Derek's footsteps approaching. My heart dropped into my stomach as he flung open the bedroom door, his face contorted with rage. In his hand, he clutched a crumpled envelope, one of the many I had used to squirrel away our escape money. "What is this?" he snarled, brandishing the envelope like a weapon. "What the hell have you been up to, Mallory?" I froze, my mind racing as I scrambled for an excuse, any lie that might diffuse the situation. But Derek was having none of it. In a flash, he crossed the room and yanked open the closet door, his eyes widening as he discovered the hidden stash of cash. "You lying bitch," he growled, whirling on me with a look of pure fury. "You were planning to leave me, weren't you?" I tried to speak, to explain, but the words caught in my throat as Derek advanced on me, his fists clenched at his sides. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "You ungrateful whore." Before I could react, his hand lashed out, striking me across the face with such force that I stumbled backwards, stars dancing before my eyes. "Derek, please," I begged, tasting blood on my split lip. "I was only trying to protect Ava and myself. You've become so volatile, so abusive. I couldn't take it anymore." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of remorse cross his features. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold, calculating fury that chilled me to the bone. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed, grabbing a fistful of my hair and wrenching my head back. You belong to me, Mallory, and if you ever try to leave again, I swear to God, I'll take everything from you, including Ava. The mention of our daughter's name sent a wave of panic crashing over me. I couldn't let him hurt her, not my sweet, innocent Ava. Please, Derek, I sobbed, clawing at his iron grip. Don't bring her into this. She's just a child. He let out a cruel laugh, his grip tightening until I thought my scalp might tear. She's my child too, Mallory. And if you think you can take her away from me, you're sorely mistaken. With a final, vicious yank, he released me, sending me crumpling to the floor in a heap. As I lay there, cradling my throbbing head, I knew in that moment that our lives were in grave danger. We had to get out, and fast, before Derek's rage spiraled out of control. Because this time, I feared there would be no coming back. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. As soon as Derek stormed out of the bedroom, I sprang into action, my mind laser-focused on one goal, getting Ava and myself out of that house before it was too late. I scrambled to gather our essentials, a few changes of clothes, our passports, and the meager stash of cash I had managed to squirrel away before Derek discovered my plan. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough to get us started on our new life, wherever that may be. My hands trembled as I packed, my heart pounding in my chest with each passing minute. I knew Derek wouldn't be gone long, and when he returned, his fury would be tenfold. As if on cue, I heard the unmistakable sound of his car pulling into the driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel like a death knell. I had to move fast. Abandoning the half-packed bag, I raced down the hall to Ava's room, bursting through the door to find her sitting cross-legged on her bed, earbuds in and oblivious to the chaos unfolding around her. "Ava," I hissed, startling her from her reverie. "We have to go now." Her eyes widened, confusion and fear flickering across her delicate features. "Mom, what's going on? What's happening?" I grabbed her by the shoulders, my grip perhaps a little too tight as I fought to keep my panic at bay. "There's no time to explain. We have to leave before your father gets back. Our lives depend on it." She must have seen the desperation in my eyes, because she didn't argue or question me further. With a shaky nod, she rose from the bed and followed me back to the bedroom, where I hurriedly stuffed the last of our belongings into the bag. The sound of the front door slamming sent a jolt of terror through me, and I froze, my heart in my throat. "Mallory." Derek's voice boomed from downstairs, laced with a menacing fury that made my blood run cold. "Where the hell are you, you lying bitch?" Ava whimpered, her eyes wide with fear, and I knew we had to move, now or never. Slinging the bag over my shoulder, I grabbed her hand and pulled her towards the bedroom window, my mind racing as I formulated our escape route. "We're going out this way," I whispered, already working to pry open the stubborn pain. "There's a trellis on the side of the house. We can climb down and make a run for the car." Ava nodded, her face pale but resolute. In that moment, I saw a strength in her that I hadn't realized she possessed, a steely determination that filled me with equal parts pride and sorrow. No child should ever have to experience the horrors we had endured. With a final heave, the window gave way, and I ushered Ava through, following close behind, just as the sound of Derek's thunderous footsteps reached the top of the stairs. We moved quickly, silently, our hearts pounding in tandem as we shimmied down the trellis and hit the ground running. The car was just ahead, our salvation glinting in the moonlight like a beacon of hope. But as we neared it, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking our path. "Derek? Going somewhere?" He sneered, his eyes glinting with a feral madness that sent chills down my spine. In that moment, time seemed to slow to a crawl. I could see the rage etched into every line of Derek's face, the hatred burning in his eyes as he stared us down like cornered prey. And in that moment, I knew. There was no going back. The days and weeks that followed our escape were a blur of constant motion, a never-ending cycle of fleeing and hiding. We couldn't risk staying in one place for too long, not with Derek's resources and his unquenchable thirst for revenge. Samantha had been our lifeline, our guardian angel in those early days. She helped us secure false identities, safe houses, and transportation as we hopscotched across the country, always one step ahead of Derek's hired goons. But the psychological toll of living in perpetual fear was immense. Ava, my once vibrant and carefree daughter, grew sullen and withdrawn, her eyes haunted by the horrors she had witnessed. And I, too, found myself jumping at every shadow, every unexpected sound, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. Still, we persevered, driven by the knowledge that the alternative, falling back into Derek's clutches, was unthinkable. It was during one of our brief respites, holed up in a dingy motel on the outskirts of some nameless town, that the first crack in our defenses appeared. "Mom, how much longer are we going to have to keep running?" Ava asked, her voice small and defeated as she stared out the grimy window. I swallowed hard, my heart aching at the weariness etched into her young features. "As long as it takes, sweetheart, until we're sure your father can't find us." She turned to face me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "But what if he never stops looking? What if we have to spend the rest of our lives like this, always running, always afraid?" The questions hung heavy in the air, their weight crushing me under the weight of their implications. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Derek was a man possessed, and he would stop at nothing to track us down, to exact his twisted brand of revenge. "I don't know, Ava," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion, "but I promise you, we'll find a way to make it through this. Together." She nodded, but the spark of hope in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a weary resignation that broke my heart. In that moment, I vowed to find a way to end this nightmare, once and for all. We couldn't go on living like this, constantly looking over our shoulders, our lives forever tainted by the specter of Derek's rage. It was time to take the fight to him. Over the next few weeks, I began to hatch a plan, reaching out to old contacts, calling in favors, and assembling a team of people I could trust to help bring Derek down. It was a risky gambit, but one I was willing to take if it meant finally securing our freedom. And then, just when I thought we had hit another dead end, a break in the case arrived in the form of an anonymous tip. Derek's location, his movements, his routine. It was the opportunity we had been waiting for, the chance to strike back and end this twisted game of cat and mouse once and for all. As I relayed the information to my team, a sense of grim determination settled over me. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for. The showdown was inevitable, and only one of us would emerge victorious. I only hoped that when the dust settled, Ava and I would be the ones left standing. The safe house was a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town, its weathered exterior belying the high-tech command center that lay within. As I stepped through the reinforced steel door, my heart was pounding in my chest, a heady mix of adrenaline and trepidation coursing through my veins. "You're sure about this, Mal?" Samantha's voice broke the tense silence, her eyes searching mine for any hint of doubt or hesitation. "There's no going back after tonight." I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve as I gave her a curt nod. "I'm sure Derek has to be stopped once and for all, for Ava's sake, if not my own." She pursed her lips, clearly not thrilled with the plan, but respecting my decision nonetheless. "All right then, let's get this show on the road." Around us, the team of ex-military operatives and private investigators I had assembled sprang into action, checking weapons and running final system diagnostics. The air was thick with tension, the weight of what was to come hanging over us like a shroud. "We have eyes on the target," came a gruff voice from the comm station, shattering the silence. "He's just left his office and is en route to the rendezvous point." My breath caught in my throat as a grainy image of Derek flickered onto the main monitor. His face twisted into a scowl as he stalked towards his waiting car. Seeing him again, even through the distorted lens of a surveillance camera, sent a chill down my spine and reignited the smoldering embers of fear and rage that had burned within me for so long. "Remember, we need him alive," I reminded the team, my voice steadier than I felt. "At least for now, he has to face justice for what he's done." A chorus of grunts and nods met my words. The men and women around me hardened professionals who understood the gravity of the situation. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of dread that had taken root in the pit of my stomach. What if something went wrong? What if Derek managed to slip through our grasp once again, disappearing into the ether and leaving us to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives? I pushed the doubts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. This was our one shot, our chance to end this nightmare once and for all. Failure was not an option. The minutes ticked by like hours as we waited with bated breath, tracking Derek's movements on the monitors until finally the call came in. He's arrived at the rendezvous point, moving into position. My heart leapt into my throat as the team sprang into action, donning tactical gear and checking weapons one last time before filing out of the safe house and into the waiting armored vehicles. "Stay safe," Samantha murmured, pulling me into a fierce hug. "And give that bastard hell for me." I nodded, unable to find the words as a lump formed in my throat. This was it, the moment I had been both dreading and anticipating for what felt like an eternity. As the convoy roared to life and peeled out onto the deserted street, I found myself gripping the edge of the console, my knuckles white with tension. Every fiber of my being was focused on the mission, on the confrontation that was about to unfold. Derek's reign of terror was about to come to an end. One way or another, tonight would be the end of the road, and I would be the one to put the final nail in his coffin. The days and weeks following Derek's capture were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media scrutiny, and the long, arduous process of picking up the pieces of our shattered lives. But through it all, a weight had been lifted, a burden that had pressed down on Ava and me for far too long. As the truth about Derek's abuse and his relentless pursuit of us came to light, the world seemed to hold its collective breath, transfixed by the sordid tale of a once powerful man brought low by his own monstrous actions. And while the court of public opinion was swift and merciless in its condemnation, it was the judicial system's reckoning that truly mattered. The trial was a grueling ordeal, with Derek's high-priced legal team doing everything in their power to cast doubt on our testimony and paint him as the victim. But in the end, the evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern of abuse too well documented to be denied. When the guilty verdict was read, a hush fell over the courtroom, broken only by the soft sound of Derek's sobs as he was led away in chains. In that moment, I felt a sense of vindication, of justice finally being served after years of living in fear and torment. But more than that, I felt a profound sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time in what felt like an eternity. In the days and weeks that followed, Ava and I began the slow process of rebuilding our lives, piece by shattered piece. It wasn't easy. The scars of our ordeal ran deep, both physical and emotional, but we were determined to forge ahead, to reclaim the happiness and sense of security that had been stolen from us for far too long. Samantha was a constant source of strength and support, her unwavering friendship a lifeline that helped us navigate the choppy waters of our newfound freedom. Together, we found a cozy little apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a far cry from the opulent prison we had once called home. But to me, it was a palace, a sanctuary where we could finally let our guard down and begin to heal. As the months passed, I watched with a mixture of pride and wonder as Ava blossomed before my eyes, the shadows that had haunted her gaze gradually giving way to a newfound sense of joy and optimism. She threw herself into her studies, determined to make the most of the second chance we had been given, and I couldn't have been prouder of the strong, resilient young woman she was becoming. For my part, I found solace in the simple pleasures of life. Long walks in the park, lazy Sunday mornings spent curled up with a good book, and evenings spent laughing and reminiscing with Samantha over a bottle of wine. It was a far cry from the high-powered corporate world I had once inhabited, but in many ways it was infinitely more fulfilling. And through it all, the specter of Derek's legacy faded, his once formidable presence reduced to a mere footnote in the story of our lives. We had survived his reign of terror, emerging from the ashes stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was excited to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because now, we were free to chart our own course, to write our own story, and to embrace the future with open arms. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. The slamming of the front door jolts me from my thoughts. Ethan storms into the living room, his face contorted with anger. "Where the hell have you been?" he demands, his voice dripping with accusation. "I was volunteering at the youth center," I reply calmly, trying to diffuse the situation. You know how much it means to me. Oh, spare me the sob story, Vivian, Ethan scoffs. You're supposed to be here, supporting me and my career. Instead, you're off playing saint to a bunch of delinquents. His words sting, but I refuse to let him see how much they hurt. They're not delinquents, Ethan. They're kids who need guidance and support. What they need is discipline and a swift kick in the ass, he retorts. And what I need is a wife who understands her role. I feel my blood boil at his condescending tone. My role? And what exactly is that, Ethan? To be your trophy wife? To sit at home and wait for you to grace me with your presence? Don't be so dramatic, he sneers. You knew what you were getting into when you married me. I'm on the fast track to partner, and I need a wife who can keep up appearances. Appearances? I echo, disbelief coloring my voice. Is that all our marriage is to you? A facade to impress your colleagues? Ethan steps closer, his eyes narrowing. Watch your tone, Vivian. Remember who pays the bills around here. The threat hangs heavy in the air, and I feel a chill run down my spine. Are you seriously going to hold that over my head? I gave up my job to move here for you, Ethan. I've sacrificed everything for this marriage. Sacrificed? He laughs humorlessly. You call sitting around all day, spending my money a sacrifice? You should be grateful for the life I've given you. Tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I blink them back, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I am grateful, Ethan, but I'm also suffocating. I feel like I'm losing myself in this marriage. Then maybe you should find yourself a new hobby, he suggests coldly. One that doesn't involve neglecting your duties as my wife. And what about your duties as my husband? I counter, my voice rising. When was the last time you even asked about my day? Or showed any interest in my life? Ethan's jaw clenches, and for a moment I think he might actually hear me. But then he shakes his head, his expression hardening. I don't have time for this, Vivian. I have a career to focus on. If you can't handle that, then maybe we need to reevaluate this marriage. With that, he turns on his heel and stalks out of the room, leaving me standing there, my heart in pieces. I sink onto the couch, my mind reeling. How did we get here? How did the man I fell in love with turn into this cold, calculating stranger? I think back to the early days of our relationship, when Ethan was attentive and loving. We met at a charity event, both passionate about making a difference in the world. He swept me off my feet with his charm and ambition, and within a year we were married. But somewhere along the way, his career took precedence over everything else. And now, I'm left wondering if there's anything left of the marriage I thought we had. 2 years into our marriage, Ethan comes home with a bombshell announcement. I've been offered a partnership at a law firm in Los Angeles, he declares, a triumphant grin on his face. I stare at him, my heart sinking. Los Angeles? But what about my job, Ethan? My students? Come on, Vivian, he cajoles. This is a once-in-lifetime opportunity. You can always find another teaching job in L.A. It's not that simple, I argue, my voice strained. I've built a life here, Ethan. I have roots in this community. Ethan's smile fades, replaced by a look of annoyance. I thought you'd be happy for me, Vivian. This is a huge step up for us. For you, maybe, I counter. But what about what I want? What about my dreams? Dreams? He scoffs. You're a high school teacher, Vivian. How far do you think that's going to take you? His words cut deep, and I feel my eyes sting with tears. I can't believe you just said that. Teaching is my passion, Ethan. It's not just a job to me. Ethan sighs, running a hand through his hair. Look, I didn't mean it like that, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, Vivian. We can't pass it up. I know he's right, but the thought of leaving everything behind feels like a knife twisting in my gut. Fine, I relent, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll take a sabbatical from teaching. Ethan's face lights up, and he pulls me into a hug. You won't regret this, Vivian. I promise. But as we pack up our life and prepare for the move, I can't shake the feeling that I'm making a terrible mistake. The day of the move arrives, and I find myself surrounded by boxes, my childhood home stripped bare. As I carefully wrap a framed photo of my parents, Ethan walks in, a look of disdain on his face. You're not seriously bringing that old junk, are you? He asks, eyeing the sentimental items I've carefully packed. They're not junk, Ethan, I defend, my voice tight. They're memories, pieces of my history. We're starting a new life, Vivian, he reminds me, his tone condescending. We don't need to drag the past along with us. I bite my tongue, not wanting to argue. But as I watch Ethan carelessly toss my treasured possessions aside, I feel a piece of myself crumble. We arrive in Los Angeles, and Ethan ushers me into our new home, a sleek, modern, high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Isn't it perfect?" he gushes, his eyes alight with excitement. I force a smile, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest. "It's lovely, Ethan." He wraps an arm around my waist, pulling me close. "This is just the beginning, Vivian. I'm going to give you the life you've always dreamed of." But as I stare out at the unfamiliar skyline, I can't help but wonder if the life I've always dreamed of is the one I'm leaving behind. 6 months pass in a blur of cocktail parties and corporate dinners, Ethan's new role consuming his every waking moment. I find solace in volunteering at a local youth center, pouring my heart into mentoring troubled teens. But one evening, as I'm getting ready for a fundraiser, Ethan barges into the bedroom, his face twisted with rage. "Are you seriously wearing that?" he demands, eyeing my simple black dress with disdain. "What's wrong with it?" I ask, my voice trembling slightly. "You look like a damn schoolmarm," he sneers. "I need you to look the part of a successful lawyer's wife, not some frumpy volunteer." Tears sting my eyes, but I blink them back, refusing to let him see how much his words hurt. "I'll change," I mumble, turning away. But as I slip into a designer gown and plaster on a fake smile, I can't shake the feeling that I'm slowly losing myself, piece by piece. 6 months into our new life in Los Angeles, Ethan's behavior takes a turn for the worse. He becomes increasingly distant and irritable, the stress of his demanding job taking a toll on our already strained relationship. I find solace in volunteering at the youth center, pouring my heart into mentoring the kids who have come to rely on me. But one evening, as I'm preparing to leave for a fundraising event, Ethan storms into the room, his face contorted with anger. "Where do you think you're going?" he demands, his voice dripping with disdain. "To the youth center fundraiser," I reply, my heart sinking at the sight of his rage. "I told you about it weeks ago. And I told you to prioritize our social obligations," he snaps. "You're supposed to be at the law firm dinner with me tonight." "I can't just abandon the kids, Ethan," I plead. "They're counting on me." "I'm counting on you," he roars, slamming his hand against the wall. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have a wife who'd rather spend her time with a bunch of delinquents than support her husband's career?" Tears sting my eyes, but I refuse to let them fall. "They're not delinquents, Ethan. They're good kids who just need someone to believe in them." "Believe in them?" he scoffs. "They're a lost cause, Vivian. Just like you'll be if you don't start prioritizing what's important." His words cut deep, but I stand my ground. I am prioritizing what's important, Ethan. Those kids need me. "And what about what I need?" he demands, his voice low and menacing. "What about the sacrifices I've made for this family?" "Sacrifices?" I echo, disbelief coloring my tone. "You've been so focused on your career that you've barely even noticed me these past few months." "Oh, I've noticed," he sneers. "I've noticed how you've let yourself go, how you'd rather wallow in self-pity than be the wife I need you to be." I reel back as if he slapped me, my heart shattering into a million pieces. "How can you say that?" I whisper, my voice trembling. "I've given up everything for you, Ethan. My job, my home, my entire life." "And now you'll give up this ridiculous volunteering," he demands, "or I'll cut off your access to our joint bank account." I stare at him in shock, unable to believe what I'm hearing. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," he says, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "I'm done indulging your little charity projects, Vivian. It's time for you to fall in line." With that, he turns on his heel and storms out of the room, leaving me to collapse onto the bed, my body shaking with silent sobs. I feel trapped, suffocated by the weight of Ethan's expectations and the life I've found myself in. Over the next few weeks, I try to be the wife Ethan wants me to be. I attend his work functions, plastering on a fake smile and pretending to be the perfect corporate spouse. But inside, I'm dying a little more each day. I long for the fulfillment I once found in teaching, for the sense of purpose that volunteering at the youth center brought me. But every time I try to broach the subject with Ethan, he shuts me down, reminding me of my place in his life. One night, as we're getting ready for yet another work dinner, I finally muster up the courage to confront him. I can't do this anymore, Ethan, I say, my voice shaking. I'm miserable. I feel like I'm losing myself. He looks at me, his eyes cold and unfeeling. You're not losing yourself, Vivian. You're finding your place in this world, and that place is by my side, supporting my career. But what about my career? I plead. What about my dreams? Dreams, he scoffs. Grow up, Vivian. It's time to face reality. This is your life now, and the sooner you accept that, the better off we'll both be. I feel something break inside of me, the last shred of hope I'd been clinging to shattering into dust. And as I follow Ethan out the door, my heart heavy with despair, I can't help but wonder if I'll ever find my way back to the person I used to be. As the months drag on, the distance between Ethan and I grows wider with each passing day. I long for the connection we once shared, for the love that brought us together in the first place. And so one evening, I muster up the courage to broach the subject that's been weighing on my heart. Ethan, I say softly, my voice trembling. I've been thinking about starting a family. He looks up from his laptop, his eyes narrowing. A family? Now? Are you out of your mind, Vivian? His harsh tone catches me off guard, and I feel my heart sink. I just thought, with your career taking off and us settling into our new life here. Settling into our new life, he scoffs. I'm barely keeping my head above water at work, and you want to add a baby to the mix? But I thought you wanted children, I whisper, my voice barely audible. Maybe someday, he says dismissively, but not now, Vivian. I'm not ready for that kind of responsibility. His words cut deep, and I feel a piece of my dream for our future crumble. But I refuse to let him see how much he's hurt me. Instead, I force a smile and nod. Of course. You're right. It was a silly idea. Ethan returns to his work, and I'm left alone with my thoughts, my heart heavy with the weight of his rejection. In an attempt to find some semblance of purpose, I take a part-time job at a bookstore. At first, Ethan seems supportive, even happy that I'm getting out of the house. But as the weeks pass, his attitude begins to change. I don't like you spending so much time away from home, he grumbles one evening as I'm getting ready for my shift. It's just a few hours a week, Ethan, I remind him gently. And I thought you wanted me to find something to keep me busy. I wanted you to find a hobby, not a job, he retorts. What's next? You'll be neglecting your duties at home to pursue some silly career? I bristle at his words, my temper flaring. My duties at home? You mean waiting on you hand and foot, catering to your every whim? Watch your tone, Vivian, he warns, his eyes flashing with anger. I take a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I'm sorry, Ethan, I didn't mean to snap. I need something for myself, something that makes me feel valued. For a moment, his expression softens, and I think he might actually understand, but then he shakes his head, his jaw clenching. Fine. Do what you want, but don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. I leave for my shift with a heavy heart, wondering if I'll ever be able to find happiness in this new life we've built. A few days later, on a whim, Ethan and I buy lottery tickets. As we sit at the kitchen table, scratching off the numbers, I can't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could be our lucky break. But as the weeks pass and the drawing comes and goes, our tickets prove to be just another disappointment. Ethan barely seems to notice, too caught up in his own world to care about my foolish dreams. And then, just when I think things can't get any worse, Ethan comes home with news that turns my world upside down. I got a promotion, he announces, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. For a moment, I allow myself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe this will be the thing that finally brings us back together, that reignites the spark we once shared. But as the days turn into weeks, Ethan's behavior only worsens. He becomes more demanding, more critical of my every move. Nothing I do seems to be good enough, and I find myself walking on eggshells, desperate to avoid his wrath. Late one night, as I lie awake in bed, listening to Ethan's steady breathing beside me, I can't help but wonder how we got here, how the man I once loved could have turned into such a monster. And as I stare up at the ceiling, my heart heavy with the weight of my own misery, I know one thing for certain. Something has to change. I can't keep living like this. I just don't know how much more I can take. Ethan's promotion seems to have only fueled his ego, and his treatment of me reaches new lows. One evening, he comes home late from work, reeking of alcohol and expensive perfume. "Where have you been?" I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "Out with clients," he slurs, stumbling into the living room. "Not that it's any of your business." I feel a flare of anger at his dismissive tone. "It is my business, Ethan. I'm your wife." He laughs, a cruel, mocking sound. "Wife? Please. You're nothing but a burden, Vivian, a millstone around my neck." His words hit me like a physical blow, and I reel back, my eyes stinging with tears. "How can you say that? After everything I've done for you, for our marriage." "What have you done exactly?" he sneers. "Quit your job? Abandoned your friends? Moved across the country for me? You should be thanking me for giving you a purpose in life." I shake my head in disbelief, unable to comprehend the venom in his voice. "A purpose? You've taken everything from me, Ethan. My career, my dreams, my sense of self-worth." "Oh, spare me the pity party," he scoffs. "You're just jealous of my success. Jealous that I've made something of myself while you've been content to sit at home and play the martyr." "Jealous?" I echo, my voice rising. "I'm not jealous of your success, Ethan. I'm disgusted by what it's turned you into." He takes a step towards me, his eyes flashing with anger. "Watch yourself, Vivian. You don't want to push me too far." But I'm too far gone to heed his warning. "Or what? You'll leave me? Go ahead. I'd rather be alone than spend another minute with a man who treats me like dirt." For a moment he looks stunned, as if he can't believe I've dared to stand up to him. But then his face twists into a sneer, and he leans in close, his breath hot against my cheek. "You're nothing without me, Vivian. Nothing. And if you even think about leaving, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life." With that, he turns on his heel and storms out of the room, leaving me trembling in his wake. I sink onto the couch, my head in my hands, and let the tears come. How did I let things get this bad? How did I let myself become so weak, so dependent on a man who clearly doesn't love me? As I sit there, lost in my own misery, my phone buzzes with an incoming text. I glance at the screen, expecting to see a message from Ethan, but instead, I find myself staring at a name I don't recognize. Natalie. My heart stops. Who is Natalie? And why is she texting my husband at this hour of the night? With shaking hands, I open the message, my eyes widening as I read the words on the screen. "I had a great time tonight, Ethan. Can't wait to see you again soon. XOXO." I feel like I've been punched in the gut. Ethan is cheating on me. The late nights, the distant behavior, the cruel words. It all makes sense now. I confront him the moment he walks through the door, my voice shaking with anger and betrayal. "Who is Natalie, Ethan? And don't you dare lie to me." He looks at me, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "She's a colleague, a friend. Not that it's any of your business." "A friend," I echo, my voice rising. "Since when do friends send flirty texts in the middle of the night?" His face hardens, and he takes a step towards me, his fists clenched at his sides. "You went through my phone. How dare you?" "How dare I?" I shout, my temper flaring. "How dare you cheat on me, Ethan? How dare you treat me like garbage while you're off screwing some other woman?" "I want a divorce," he says flatly, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'm done with this marriage, Vivian. Done with you." His words hit me like a physical blow, and I stumble back, my vision blurring with tears. But even through the pain, I feel a flicker of something else. Something I haven't felt in a long time. Rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. And as I stand there, watching the man I once loved walk away from me, I make a vow to myself. I will make him pay for what he's done. I will make him suffer the way he's made me suffer. And I know just how to do it. Ethan's betrayal cuts deep, but I refuse to let him see how much he's hurt me. Instead, I channel my pain into planning my revenge. And the first step is to gather evidence of his infidelity. I hire a private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Maria who assures me she'll get the proof I need. And sure enough, within a week, she presents me with a stack of photos and recordings that leave no doubt about Ethan's affair. I confront him with the evidence, my heart pounding in my chest as I watch the color drain from his face. "How could you do this to me, Ethan?" I ask, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "How could you throw away everything we had for some cheap fling?" He looks at me, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "Don't be so dramatic, Vivian. It was just sex. It didn't mean anything." His callousness takes my breath away, and I feel a wave of nausea wash over me. "Just sex? Is that all our marriage was to you? Just a convenient arrangement until something better came along? He shrugs, his lips curling into a cruel smirk. What can I say? I got bored. And Natalie, well, she knows how to keep things interesting. I shake my head in disbelief, unable to comprehend the depth of his betrayal. You disgust me, Ethan. You're nothing but a selfish, manipulative bastard. And you're a pathetic, clingy little girl who can't accept that her husband has outgrown her, he sneers. Face it, Vivian, you were never enough for me. You never will be. His words hit me like a physical blow, and I reel back, my eyes stinging with tears. But I refuse to let him see me cry. Not anymore. Get out, I whisper, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of my house and out of my life. I never want to see you again. He laughs, a harsh, mocking sound that echoes through the room. Gladly. But don't think you're going to get a dime from me in the divorce. I'll make sure you end up with nothing, Vivian. Nothing. With that, he turns on his heel and storms out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I sink to the floor, my body shaking with silent sobs as the reality of what's just happened washes over me. But even through the pain, I feel a flicker of something else. Something I haven't felt in a long time. Hope. Because I know something Ethan doesn't. Something that will change everything. I've won the lottery. 2 weeks ago, on a whim, I bought a ticket for the Powerball jackpot, and against all odds, I hit the jackpot. $10 million, all mine. I've kept the news to myself, not wanting to give Ethan any reason to suspect that I might be planning something. But now, as I sit on the floor of our once shared home, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to make Ethan pay for what he's done. I'm going to hit him where it hurts the most, his wallet. I hire the best divorce attorney in town, a shark named Jack, who assures me he'll make sure I get everything I'm entitled to. And with the evidence of Ethan's infidelity on my side, he tells me I have a strong case for a generous settlement. But I don't want Ethan's money. I want to make him suffer. I want to watch him squirm as he realizes just how much he's underestimated me. And so, on the day of our divorce hearing, I walk into the courtroom with my head held high, my lottery ticket tucked safely in my purse. I watch as Ethan smirks at me from across the room, confident that he's going to walk away with everything. But then I take the stand, and I tell the judge everything. I tell him about Ethan's affair, about his cruel treatment of me throughout our marriage. And then, with a triumphant smile, I pull out my lottery ticket and hold it up for the world to see. I don't want a dime from this man, Your Honor, I say, my voice ringing out clear and strong. I have all the money I need, and then some. All I want is my freedom, and the satisfaction of knowing that Ethan will never be able to hurt me again. The look on Ethan's face as the judge grants me a divorce and orders him to pay my legal fees is one I'll never forget. And as I walk out of the courtroom, my head held high and my heart finally free, I know that I've won. Not just the lottery, but my life back. And that's a prize worth more than all the money in the world. With the divorce finalized and my lottery winnings secure, I feel a sense of freedom I haven't known in years. But even as I revel in my newfound independence, I can't shake the desire to make Ethan pay for what he's done. And so I set my plan into motion. I know that Ethan's law firm handles high-profile clients, including several major banks in the city. And I also know that he's been angling for a promotion to senior partner, a position that would put him in charge of managing those accounts. So I decide to hit him where it hurts. His reputation. I make an appointment at Ethan's bank, the same one he's been schmoozing with for months in the hopes of landing their business. And when I walk in, dressed to the nines and carrying a briefcase full of cash, I make sure everyone knows exactly who I am. I'd like to make a deposit, I say, my voice ringing out loud and clear across the lobby. $10 million to be exact. The teller's eyes widen, and I can see the wheels turning in her head as she tries to figure out who I am and where I got such a large sum of money. Of course, ma'am, she stammers, ushering me into a private room. We'll just need to verify the funds and fill out some paperwork. I smile, settling into a chair and crossing my legs. Take your time. I've got all day. As the teller scurries off to get her manager, I lean back and savor the moment. I can only imagine the look on Ethan's face when he finds out that his ex-wife, the woman he thought he'd broken, is now one of the bank's most valued clients. And sure enough, within minutes, the bank manager is falling all over himself to accommodate me. He offers me everything from a personal financial advisor to a VIP lounge pass, all the while assuring me that my money is in good hands. I just smile and nod, playing the part of the gracious client. But inside, I'm counting down the seconds until Ethan walks through that door. And when he finally does, his face a mask of shock and anger, I know I've won. "Vivian," he hisses, his eyes darting around the room as if he's afraid someone might overhear. "What the hell are you doing here?" I smile, my voice sweet as honey. "Just making a little deposit, darling. I thought you'd be happy to see me supporting your bank." His face turns red, and I can see the veins in his neck bulging with barely contained rage. "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Trying to humiliate me in front of my clients?" I shrug, my eyes wide with feigned innocence. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Ethan. I'm just a satisfied customer, here to do business with the best bank in town." He takes a step towards me, his fists clenched at his sides. "You little bitch, you think you're so clever, don't you? Well, let me tell you something. You may have won the lottery, but you're still nothing, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." But before he can say another word, the bank manager clears his throat, his voice nervous but firm. "Mr. Thompson, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't tolerate that kind of language or behavior towards our clients." Ethan's face goes white, and I can see the panic in his eyes as he realizes the gravity of the situation. He's just insulted and threatened a high-value client in front of his boss, and there's no way he's going to come out of this unscathed. I apologize," he stammers, his voice shaking. "I didn't mean—" But it's too late. The damage is done. And as he's escorted out of the room by security, his head hanging in shame, I feel a rush of triumph that's almost intoxicating. I've hit Ethan where it hurts the most, his ego, and I know that this is just the beginning. He may have taken everything from me, but now I'm the one holding all the cards, and I'm going to make damn sure he never forgets it. News of Ethan's outburst at the bank spreads like wildfire, and within days, he's facing disciplinary action from his firm. His clients start to pull their accounts, and his once promising career begins to crumble before his eyes. I watch from afar, savoring every moment of his downfall. But even as I revel in my revenge, I can't help but feel a twinge of something else, something that feels suspiciously like regret. And then one day I receive a phone call that changes everything. "Vivian?" Ethan's voice is weak, broken. "I need to see you, please." I hesitate, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me wants to hang up, to leave him to wallow in his own misery. But another part of me, the part that once loved him, can't resist the plea in his voice. "Fine," I say, my voice cold. "But make it quick." We meet at a coffee shop near my old apartment, a place we used to frequent in happier times. Ethan looks like a shell of his former self, his eyes bloodshot and his skin pale. "I'm sorry," he says, his voice barely above a whisper, "for everything. I know I can't take back what I did, but I need you to know that I'm truly deeply sorry." I stare at him, my heart twisting in my chest. I want to believe him, to forgive him, but I can't. Not after everything he's put me through. "It's too late, Ethan," I say, my voice trembling. "You had your chance, and you blew it. I'm done being your punching bag." He nods, his eyes filling with tears. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I'm going to get help. I'm going to be a better man, even if it's too late for us." I feel a lump rising in my throat, and I swallow hard. "I hope you do, Ethan, for your sake and for the sake of anyone else who might cross your path." He looks at me, his eyes searching mine. "What about you, Vivian? What are you going to do now?" I take a deep breath, my mind racing with possibilities. And then, suddenly, I know exactly what I want to do. "I'm going to start a foundation," I say, my voice growing stronger with each word. "A foundation that helps women like me, women who have been beaten down and broken by men like you. I'm going to use my money to make a difference, to help others find their strength and their voice." Ethan stares at me, his eyes wide with surprise. That's amazing, Vivian. I'm proud of you." I nod, my heart swelling with pride. "I'm proud of me too, Ethan, and I'm done letting you or anyone else dictate my worth." We part ways soon after, and as I walk out of the coffee shop, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. I know that I'll never forget what Ethan did to me, but I also know that I'm stronger because of it. And as I set to work on my foundation, pouring my heart and soul into helping other women find their power, I realized that this is what I was meant to do all along. I may have started out as a victim, but now I'm a survivor, and I'm going to make damn sure that no one ever forgets it. Months turn into years, and as my foundation grows and thrives, I find myself back in my hometown, teaching at the same high school where I started my career. I'm happy now, truly happy. I've found my purpose, my calling, and I know that everything I went through, every moment of pain and heartbreak was worth it to get me to where I am today. I may not have the perfect life, but I have a life that's all my own. And that's more than enough for me. As I stand in front of my classroom looking out at the eager faces of my students, I can't help but smile. I know that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, doing exactly what I'm meant to do, and no one, not even Ethan, can take that away from me. I stared at Kyle in disbelief, his words cutting deeper than any knife. "A barren bitch?" I repeated, the venom dripping from his drunken slur. The wedding reception around us fell silent, all eyes turning towards the commotion. "You heard me," Kyle sneered, his face flushed from too much whiskey. "When are you going to accept that you're defective? We should have never gotten married." White-hot shame burned my cheeks as I looked around at my family's horrified expressions. My sister Amy's hand flew to her mouth, her beautiful wedding day now marred by her new brother-in-law's cruelty. In that moment, I knew my marriage was over. How could I ever forgive such a humiliating insult, hurled at me simply for being unable to conceive? The one thing I'd been upfront about from the start, yet Kyle had promised to accept. I thought back to those early days when we first met. I was his realtor during his bitter divorce. Despite the awkward circumstances, an unexpected spark had formed between us. Kyle love-bombed me with reassurances that my infertility didn't matter, that he just wanted to build a life with me. Looking into his glazed, hateful eyes now, I barely recognized that same man. "I'm leaving," I declared, fighting back tears. I refused to allow Kyle to see me crumble. Not after he'd so callously disrespected me in front of everyone. "Yeah, get out of my face," he growled, swaying on unsteady feet. "Useless." I stormed out with as much dignity as I could muster, my heart shattering into pieces. How could someone I loved turn so monstrous over the very issue he claimed to accept? In the parking lot, I collapsed against my car, sobs racking my body. Distantly, I heard Amy calling my name, but I couldn't bear to face her, or anyone right now. I just wanted to go home, to the house I'd worked so hard to purchase through a successful real estate career. A career that had always come first for me, until my biological clock started ticking and I realized how much I longed for a child of my own. A dream that now seemed permanently out of reach because of my so-called husband's cruelty. Anger began to eclipse my sadness as I thought about all the times I'd broached trying IVF, only for Kyle to shut me down or make excuses for not getting tested himself. Was this his plan all along? To string me along until he could publicly humiliate me over my infertility? Well, if that was the game he wanted to play, I vowed in that moment to make him pay dearly. I would fight for everything in the divorce, the house, the assets, the whole 9 yards. And I wouldn't stop there. Kyle had awoken a vengeful fire within me that would burn every last part of his miserable existence to the ground. Whatever it took, I would make him suffer as he'd made me suffer tonight. He wanted to see a real bitch. He was about to meet one, and by the time I was done with him, he'd have a new word for what I was: unstoppable. I couldn't get the image of Kyle's cruel sneer out of my mind as I sat alone in the dimly lit bar nursing a glass of Cabernet. Normally, I preferred to drink at home, but tonight I needed the ambiance of somewhere public to take my mind off the events at Amy's wedding reception. "Can I get you another?" The bartender nodded towards my empty glass, but I shook my head. One was enough for me to take the edge off without going overboard. As I sipped the last few ruby drops, my mind drifted back to those first giddy months when Kyle and I began dating. He'd been so attentive, so understanding about my infertility struggles. Looking back, I realized he'd simply been mirroring me, telling me exactly what I wanted to hear. We'd met during one of the lowest points of my life, Kyle hiring me as his realtor to sell the house he'd shared with his ex-wife. Despite the somber circumstances, there was an undeniable spark between us from that first open house walkthrough. "I have to admit, you're making this painful process a lot more bearable," Kyle had said with a warm smile, his hazel eyes crinkling at the corners. "You've got a great bedside manner for an agent." I'd felt an unexpected flutter in my chest at the compliment. "Well, I do try to make my clients as comfortable as possible during emotional transitions like this." "Oh, I'm definitely comfortable around you," he'd said with a wink, leaving me flustered but intrigued. Over the next few weeks, Kyle's harmless flirtations escalated until he finally asked me out for drinks. I'll admit I was hesitant at first. Dating a client seemed like such a conflict of interest, but Kyle a charming, persistent man, and eventually I gave in to his pursuit. "I want you to know, I'm okay with the fact that you can't have kids," he'd said on one of our first dates, catching me off guard with his forwardness. "My ex put me through hell trying to get pregnant for years. I'm kind of relieved not to go through that again." I'd tensed up, prepared for the usual rejection that came whenever I disclosed my infertility to potential partners. But Kyle simply reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Hey, I mean it. That's not a deal breaker for me at all. You're smart, successful, beautiful. What more could a guy want?" His easy acceptance was like a balm to the wound I'd carried for so long. Here was a man who didn't care about my inability to bear children, who seemed to genuinely want me for me. How naive I was back then. "Another glass of wine?" The bartender's voice pulled me from my reverie. I looked up, blinking against the harsh lights. No, I'm good. Just get me my tab, please." I needed to sober up and clear my head. As I settled the bill and headed for the door, anger began to simmer within me once again. How dare Kyle take the one part of me I'd always been upfront about and use it as a weapon against me? After he'd sworn up and down it didn't matter? Well, if he thought he'd be rid of me so easily, he had another thing coming. I was done being the sad, yearning woman he could trample over. From here on out, Kyle was going to learn exactly what a real bitch looked like. And by the time I was through with him, he'd be begging for mercy. I took a deep, steadying breath before ringing the doorbell of my own home. It had been 3 days since Kyle's atrocious outburst at Amy's wedding, and I'd temporarily been staying at a hotel to clear my head. But it was time to rip off the Band-Aid. The door swung open, and Kyle stood there, his expression unreadable. He didn't appear hungover or remorseful in the slightest. "We need to talk," I said firmly, pushing past him into the hallway. He silently followed me into the living room, taking a seat in the recliner as I perched on the edge of the sofa. "I've been thinking a lot about our situation," I began carefully. "What you said at the wedding was—" I had to pause to collect myself. "It was unforgivable, Kyle. You humiliated me in front of my entire family." He opened his mouth, presumably to offer some half-baked apology, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Don't. Just don't. I don't want to hear excuses or hollow apologies. What's done is done, and I can't look past that kind of cruelty." Kyle's jaw tightened mulishly. "So what? You're just going to give up on us? On having a family?" I laughed bitterly at that. "You're the one who gave up on that dream long ago. When was the last time you even entertained the idea of fertility treatments, of doing whatever it takes to make a child happen for us?" Silence answered me, just as I expected. Kyle had been stonewalling my attempts to pursue IVF or even get basic testing done. "That's what I thought," I said, more to myself than him. "The truth is, you've checked out of this marriage for a while. You just didn't have the backbone to end it yourself." "That's not true," Kyle snapped, finally showing a flicker of emotion. "Jesus, Vivian, you know how much I want a kid of my own. But conventional routes haven't worked, and I'm not interested in exploring other options right now." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious right now? You're the one putting roadblocks in our way at every turn. Anytime I bring up IVF, you shut me down immediately." "Those treatments are expensive and intrusive," he countered. "I'm not comfortable subjecting you to that until we've exhausted all other possibilities." "Like what?" I threw up my hands in exasperation. "We're not getting any younger, Kyle. And you refuse to even get your fertility tested to see if the issue is on your end." An ugly look crossed his face then. "Oh, so now you're implying I'm the problem? That's real rich coming from Miss Barren bitch." White-hot rage lanced through me at his vicious reuse of that degrading insult. Before I could stop myself, I grabbed the heavy crystal vase from the end table and whipped it directly at his head. Kyle ducked just in time, the vase shattering against the wall in an explosion of glass and water. We both froze, chests heaving, staring at each other in shock. In that moment, I knew there was no going back for us. Whatever tender feelings I'd once harbored for this man were gone, eroded by a callousness I could no longer excuse or endure. "Get out," I said in a low, trembling voice. "Get your shit and get out of my house." For once, Kyle seemed to understand I was deadly serious. He stood slowly, holding my gaze with an unreadable look. Then, without another word, he turned and left the room to pack his things. 3 weeks had passed since I kicked Kyle out, and I was just starting to feel like I could breathe again. The divorce proceedings were underway, and with each legal maneuver, I felt layers of his toxic presence being stripped away from my life. I should have known it wouldn't last. The incessant ringing of my cell dragged me from a restful slumber. Frowning, I squinted at the caller ID. It was Kyle. Again. I let it go to voicemail like I had been doing for days. Wrapping my robe around me, I shuffled into the kitchen to brew some coffee, trying to shake off the grogginess. My phone began ringing once more from the other room. "For fuck's sake," I muttered, abandoning my pursuit of caffeine to snatch up the device. "What?" "Don't hang up," Kyle's voice came through the line, thick and slurred. Of course he was drunk. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," I replied coldly. "This divorce is happening whether you like it or not." "Vivian, baby, listen to me." He was beginning to ramble, his words running together unintelligibly. I pinched the bridge of my nose in frustration. "Kyle, you're wasted. I'm not doing this right now." "I met someone," he suddenly blurted out. I stilled, ice flooding my veins. "What did you say?" "There's this girl at work." Kyle barreled on, uncaring of the fresh hell he was putting me through. "Her name's Jade, pretty little thing, you know, with workin' ovaries and all that." My breath came in harsh pants as I digested the full extent of his betrayal. He'd been cheating on me this whole time, with some fertile young thing who could give him what I couldn't. "You son of a bitch," I hissed through gritted teeth. "How long has this been going on?" "Does it matter?" Kyle slurred carelessly. "Face it, Viv, we were dead in the water from the start. You got a defective body, and I got needs, you know?" I was trembling with rage, my knuckles white from gripping the phone so tightly. How dare he? How dare he try to blame this on me after he'd sworn my infertility was no issue? "I want you to listen to me very carefully, Kyle," I said in a low, dangerous tone. "You're going to sober up, and you're going to gather whatever pathetic belongings you have left at this house, because I swear to God, if you show up here again uninvited, I will call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." There was a pause, then Kyle snorted derisively. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic, babe. That's what I'll miss most about you." I disconnected the call without another word, my entire body shaking with hatred and disgust. The man I had loved, the man I nearly sacrificed my career for to start a family with, had revealed himself as an abusive, unfaithful monster. Fine. If this was how he wanted to play it, I would oblige him. No more Mrs. Nice Guy. It was time to fight fire with hellfire. I would take him for every last penny and asset in this divorce, and that would just be the start. By the time I was through with Kyle, he would have absolutely nothing left. No money, no reputation, no future. Just a shell of the man who thought he could walk all over me and get away with it. He wanted to see a real bitch? Oh, he was going to get one. And this time she would be utterly unstoppable. The sharp clack of my heels against the marble floor echoed through the cavernous courthouse lobby as I strode towards the designated courtroom. My stomach was a roiling knot of nerves and fury, but I refused to let it show on my face. I was all business today. Kyle was already seated at the defendant's table when I arrived, slouched in his chair with a sullen expression. His lawyer leaned over to murmur something in his ear, but he just shrugged listlessly. Typical Kyle, never taking anything seriously until it was too late. Miss Archer, my attorney Jessica, greeted me with a warm smile as I took my place. "Are you ready for this?" I gave her a curt nod, my jaw clenched tightly. More than ready. I'd been counting down the days until I could finally face Kyle in this arena, and make him pay for his deplorable actions. The judge entered and called the court into session. I tuned out the usual procedural blah blah, keeping my eyes trained on Kyle with laser focus. He refused to meet my gaze, however, fixing his stare somewhere in the middle distance. Finally, it was time for opening statements. Kyle's lawyer, some smug jackass in an expensive suit, stood and launched into a long-winded diatribe about how his client was just a poor, downtrodden man being persecuted by his wife's inability to have children. How Kyle had stuck by me for years, waiting patiently to start a family, only to have his dreams crushed by my medical condition. I had to grip the table to keep from erupting at the blatant character assassination. How dare they try to paint Kyle as some sort of long-suffering victim, after the unspeakable way he disrespected and betrayed me? When it was Jessica's turn, she calmly recounted the real facts. How Kyle had willfully cheated on and abandoned me after I'd been upfront about my infertility from the start. How he'd grown abusive and mocked my condition, violating the prenuptial agreement we'd signed about dealing with this issue together through IVF or other treatments. Mr. Walker is an adulterer and a liar who has caused severe emotional trauma to my client, Jessica stated, her voice like steel. We will be seeking full entitlement of assets as well as spousal support on Miss Archer's behalf. She has more than upheld her end of their marital contract. I could feel Kyle's hateful glare burning a hole in the side of my head, but I didn't dare look his way. I was too busy fighting back a triumphant smirk. This was merely the opening salvo. By the time these proceedings were over, Kyle would be left with nothing but the clothes on his back. Every last penny, property, and asset would be striped from him in recompense for his cruelty. And even that wouldn't be enough for me. The legal realm was just the start. I would make it my life's mission to utterly decimate Kyle's existence down to the bone. He thought he'd been humiliated at Amy's wedding? He hadn't seen anything yet. As the judge droned on, laying out the schedule for evidence presentation and witness testimony, I allowed myself a sidelong glance at my soon-to-be ex-husband. Our eyes met, and I made sure he could see the cold, brutal determination in my gaze, a silent promise of the suffering to come. Kyle's sneer faltered for just a moment before he looked away. Good. He was finally starting to understand that he'd awoken a vengeful beast that would never rest until he paid the ultimate price. And I always collected what was owed to me. The rhythmic tapping of my manicured nails against the sleek desktop provided a steady metronome as I pored over the documents laid out before me. Financial records, property deeds, business prospectus files, I had dug up every last scrap of Kyle's personal and professional life like a bloodhound. My eyes narrowed as I studied the latest incriminating paper trail. So this was how Kyle had been funding his tawdry little affair with that perky blonde Jade, siphoning money from his sham of a business into an offshore account, thinking he could hide his indiscretions from me. Fool. There wasn't a single underhanded deal or shady transaction that could escape my scrutiny. Not when I had the most powerful tools in my arsenal, an encyclopedic knowledge of real estate loopholes, and my unshakable thirst for vengeance. The divorce proceedings had been a mere opening salvo. Kyle had been so smug, so sure he could bully and manipulate his way into keeping the bulk of our assets like he had in his previous marriage. But I'd beaten him at his own game, stripping away everything he tried to protect until he was left with next to nothing. Yet that still wasn't enough for me, not by a long shot. No, I needed to go to earth on his entire miserable existence, destroy every last thread of his finances, his reputation, his future prospects, until he was left as a sniveling, impoverished husk. Only then would I finally be able to breathe freely again. A sudden knock at the door broke my concentration. Come in, come in. I called out crisply. Jessica strode into the room, her sharp gaze scanning the paper trail laid out before me. Working late again, I see, she remarked with a hint of admiration. You really are relentless when you set your mind to something, Vivian. You know me, I replied with a thin smile. I never leave a job half-finished. Well, your dedication is certainly paying off. Jessica set a glossy folder on the desk between us. I have the latest updates on our extracurricular activities regarding Mr. Walker. I snatched up the folder eagerly, flipping it open to examine the contents. A feral grin slowly spread across my face as I took in the damning evidence. Phone records, financial statements, photos. All the proof I needed to bring the next phase of my revenge scheme crashing down on Kyle's head. "This is perfect," I purred, looking up at Jessica with undisguised glee. "He'll never see this coming." "I must admit, I had my doubts when you first proposed this undertaking," Jessica said carefully. "It's not exactly something they cover in law school ethics courses. But you're a professional who understands that ethical rules are more like guidelines," I countered with a wink, "especially when the ends justify the means." Jessica's cool demeanor cracked slightly as she let out a low chuckle. "Well, when you put it that way, let's just say I've enjoyed being on the winning team for once." "Don't worry. You'll be compensated handsomely for all your efforts," I assured her, already turning my mind to the delicious ways I could dismantle Kyle's world using this new intel. "Thanks to you, that bastard is going to wish he'd never been born by the time I'm through with him." "I have no doubt," Jessica murmured, almost sounding impressed against her will. She drew her blazer a little tighter. "Well then, I'll leave you to it. Just let me know if there's anything else I can do to assist in your endeavors." I was already only half listening, my laser focus burning through the documents before me as I began formulating my intricate new game plan. Kyle thought he could slither away from our marriage and build a new life on top of the ashes like some soulless phoenix. He was about to learn just how foolish that assumption was. I would make certain he had no life to go back to at all. Not when I was through burying every last remnant of his very existence. Let the real games begin. The harsh buzzing of the intercom dragged me from my slumber. Bleary-eyed, I fumbled for the phone. "Yes? What is it?" I mumbled. "Miss Archer, there's someone here claiming to be your husband." The confused voice of the doorman crackled through the line. "He's demanding to be let up, but I know you have that restraining order in place." I was abruptly wide awake, icy tendrils of dread lancing through me. Sure enough, I could make out the muffled shouting of an all-too-familiar voice echoing up from the lobby. "Don't let him anywhere near this building," I ordered, my tone brooking no argument as I slipped from bed and began hastily dressing. "I'm calling the police right now." "Yes, ma'am." Alerting security as well. I could still hear Kyle's drunken bellowing faintly through the line as I jammed my feet into a pair of shoes. That reckless idiot, did he really think he could just violate the protection order without consequences? Then again, he'd never been one to think things through. His arrogance and temper were about to be his undoing once again. I threw on a coat over my pajamas and stormed out into the hallway, stabbing at the elevator call button with far more force than necessary. The doors opened with an obedient ding, but I barely registered them as I continued mashing the button furiously. Stupid, worthless piece of... "Whoa! Hey!" A startled voice made me spin around. A young man in a bathrobe stood there gaping at me, his eyes wide. Just a neighbor, clearly bemused by my behavior. You need to take it easy there, ma'am," he said carefully, as if talking someone down from a ledge. "It's just an elevator, yeah. No need to bash the thing up." I opened my mouth to issue a blistering retort, but the words died in my throat as a sudden crash echoed from the stairwell down the hall, following by the unmistakable sounds of shouting and a scuffle. "Get off me! You rent-a-cop morons! That psycho bitch is my wife." My heart plummeted into my stomach as I recognized Kyle's voice. He was here, in the building. Somehow he'd slipped past the security downstairs. The stairwell door burst open, and Kyle came tumbling through, grappling with two large guards in ill-fitting uniforms. A lamp went crashing to the floor in the melee, and the neighbor let out a strangled yelp as he flattened himself against the wall. "You!" Kyle's bloodshot eyes landed on me with feral hatred as the guards struggled to subdue his flailing limbs. "You did this to me, you miserable barren hag! You took everything from me!" Shards of glass crunched underfoot as he broke free for just a moment, lunging at me with outstretched hands as if to wring my neck. The guards recovered quickly, seizing him by the shoulders and slamming him face first into the wall with sickening force. "Get him out of here," I said quietly, adrenaline thrumming through me as I watched Kyle's pathetic form slump to the floor. "And make sure he gets booked this time." The wail of approaching sirens echoed up from the street below, announcing the cavalry's arrival. I lifted my chin, refusing to let that sniveling worm see me flinch or show any weakness whatsoever. This was just another hiccup in my long-game agenda, a minor inconvenience that would barely dent the surface of the torment I had in store for Kyle, one that would never, ever stop until he was utterly erased from existence. As the police stormed in to subdue and haul away my raving soon-to-be ex-husband, I turned and headed back towards my apartment, chin held high. Kyle could scream and rage all he wanted. It only made my ultimate victory all the sweeter. The neighbor was still frozen against the wall, staring at me with a mixture of horror and awe. I offered him a thin smile as I passed. "You may want to get those locks changed, dear," I said lightly. "This building clearly has a bit of a pest problem." I sipped my mimosa leisurely, basking in the warm California sun filtering through the patio doors. Laughter and cheerful chatter drifted over from where my husband Nathan played an energetic game of tag with our rambunctious 5-year-old son in the backyard. "Mommy, Mommy, did you see me run from Daddy?" The little whirlwind came barreling over, his cheeks flushed with exertion and delight. "I saw, baby," I chuckled, ruffling his tousled brown hair. "You're getting so fast." "Not fast enough to outrun me forever." Nathan joined us with a roguish grin, scooping up our giggling son and pelting him with raspberries against his neck. I watched the tender scene with a sense of contentment settling over me like a warm blanket. To think, just a few years ago I had been trapped in a bitter, loveless marriage headed for an inevitable explosion. If someone had told me back then that this kind of happiness and peace was in my future, I would have laughed in their face. Yet, here I was, the proud mother of the child I'd longed for, sharing my life with a caring partner who adored me. All because I'd had the strength to walk away from the toxic situation with my previous husband and take my future into my own hands. Nathan set our son down, allowing him to scamper off towards the swing set before settling onto the patio lounge beside me. He draped an arm around my shoulders, pressing a kiss to my temple. "You look so beautiful sitting here like the queen you are," he murmured in that deep timbre that still made my heart flutter after all this time. I leaned into his embrace with a contented sigh. "I'm just relieved we were able to have this," I said honestly. "For so long, I thought motherhood was an impossible dream." "Well, you never gave up on that dream despite everything," Nathan said fondly. "That's one of the things I admire most about you, Viv. Your perseverance in the face of adversity is downright awe-inspiring." A wry smile tugged at my lips as I thought about just how strong I'd had to be to overcome the adversity of my failed first marriage, to dismantle my ex's entire existence through sheer grit and determination, ensuring he was left with a ruined husk of a life as penance. Of course, Nathan knew none of those unsavory details. I'd been careful to keep that dark period tightly under wraps, not wanting its poison to seep into my fresh start. As far as he and the rest of the world were concerned, I was simply a successful career woman who had prioritized her goals for many years before allowing love into her life again. They didn't need to know the brutal lengths I'd gone to in order to enact my ultimate revenge. How I'd systematically stripped my ex of his finances, his business, his reputation, until he was left homeless on the streets, a broken, destitute shell of a man. A harsh punishment, to be sure, but a fitting one after the way he'd betrayed and tormented me over my infertility. "You know, I actually ran into Kyle the other day," Nathan suddenly spoke up, jarring me from my thoughts. "Well, I should say he ran into me while panhandling on the street." My blood froze in my veins at the mention of that name, the one remnant of my dark past that I could never fully escape, no matter how much I tried to bury it. "He's really in a bad way these days," Nathan went on, oblivious to my discomfort, raving about some grand injustice being done to him, how his life was stolen away by a vindictive woman. I kept my expression carefully neutral, even as my heart thudded against my ribcage. So my masterful machinations had reduced Kyle to a delusional, rambling beggar spouting conspiracies to anyone who would listen. Fitting, in a tragically poetic way. Nathan shook his head sadly. I almost felt sorry for the guy, to be honest, until he got aggressive and started shouting threats, that is. Had to call the cops to get him to move along. "I see," I said tightly, grateful when our son came bounding over to recapture Nathan's attention. I took a long pull from my mimosa, willing my body to release its tension. The truth was, I didn't feel even an ounce of pity for the broken man Kyle had become. He was simply reaping what he'd sown through his vile actions all those years ago. A waking nightmare of his own making that he was doomed to endure, alone and forgotten by the world. Perhaps someday I would be able to purge him from my thoughts completely and bask in this new life I'd built without any lingering shadows. But until then, I would wear the scars of my trials like badges of honor, reminders of my strength. After all, I was the one who had risen from the ashes to become unstoppable, and I would never let anyone make me a victim again. The stench of lilies and the murmur of condolences fill the air as I stand beside Lydia's casket, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I never imagined I'd outlive my own child, but here I am, saying goodbye to my beautiful, talented daughter. Natalie, my eldest, stands across from me, her face a mask of composure. How can she be so calm when her sister lies lifeless before us? As the priest concludes the service, Natalie steps forward, a glint of metal catching my eye. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out a small flash drive, holding it over Lydia's casket. "I'm sorry, Lydia," she whispers, her voice devoid of emotion, "but I had to do it." With that, she drops the drive into the coffin, the clunk of metal against wood echoing through the silent chapel. Confusion and anger surge through me. What could Natalie possibly mean by that? What secrets does that flash drive hold? I can't bear the thought of my daughter's relationship being tainted by darkness, even in death. As the mourners file out of the chapel, I approach Natalie, my voice trembling. "What was that about, Natalie? What did you put in your sister's coffin?" She looks at me, her eyes cold and distant. "It's nothing, Mom, just a silly inside joke between Lydia and me. Don't worry about it." But I can't shake the feeling that there's more to this than Natalie lets on. The way she dropped that flash drive, the emptiness in her voice. It's unsettling. I excuse myself from the reception, my mind reeling. I need answers, and I need them now. I make my way to Lydia's studio, the place where she poured her heart and soul into her art. As I step inside, the familiar scent of paint and canvas envelops me, and memories of Lydia's laughter and creativity flood my mind. I rummage through her desk, searching for any clues that might shed light on the mystery of the flash drive. As I rifle through papers and sketchbooks, my hand brushes against a small, hidden compartment. With trembling fingers, I pry it open, revealing a letter addressed to me in Lydia's handwriting. "Dear Mom," it begins, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and Natalie has finally shown her true colors. There are things you need to know about my sister, things I've kept hidden for far too long." As I read on, my heart sinks with each revelation. Lydia's words paint a picture of jealousy, manipulation, and betrayal, with Natalie at the center of it all. The flash drive, it seems, holds the evidence of Natalie's misdeeds, the very secrets that may have led to Lydia's untimely death. I clutch the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. How could I have been so blind to the darkness lurking within my own family? I know now that I must confront Natalie and uncover the truth, no matter how painful it may be. I owe it to Lydia to bring her sister to justice, and to finally lay my beautiful daughter to rest. With a heavy heart and a determined spirit, I tuck the letter into my pocket and head back to the reception, ready to face the secrets that have torn my family apart. Lydia, my sweet girl, I promise I won't let your memory be tainted by your sister's actions. I will find the truth, and I will make things right, no matter the cost. As I drive home from Lydia's funeral, my mind drifts back to the day when the cracks in our family first began to show. It was a sunny afternoon, and we had gathered at Natalie's lavish house for a family dinner. Lydia had just opened her art studio, and I could see the pride and excitement in her eyes as she shared her plans with us. "I can't believe you're wasting your time with this art nonsense." Natalie scoffed, swirling her wine glass. "When are you going to grow up and get a real job, Lydia?" Lydia's smile faltered, but she held her ground. "This is my real job, Natalie. I'm an artist, and I'm good at what I do." Natalie let out a harsh laugh. "An artist? Please. You'll never make a living off your silly little paintings. You need to face reality and stop being such a dreamer." I could see the hurt in Lydia's eyes, but before I could intervene, Natalie leaned in, her voice dripping with condescension. Listen, Lydia, I have a business proposition for you. I'm working on a big project, and I could use your help. It's a bit unconventional, but it'll pay well, better than your little art studio ever could. Lydia hesitated, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to prove herself, to show Natalie that she could succeed on her own terms. But Natalie was persistent, and in the end, Lydia relented. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll do it, but only because I need the money to keep my studio afloat. Natalie smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile that sent shivers down my spine. Excellent, I knew you'd see things my way. As the memory fades, I feel a wave of guilt wash over me. I should have spoken up, should have defended Lydia and put a stop to Natalie's manipulation. But I remained silent, hoping that my daughters would work things out on their own. Now, as I sit in Lydia's studio, surrounded by the evidence of Natalie's betrayal, I know that my silence was a mistake. Lydia's journal entries reveal the depths of Natalie's jealousy and the lengths she went to sabotage her sister's career. The emails and photos on the flash drive expose Natalie's involvement in illegal activities, the very scheme she coerced Lydia into joining. I can't help but wonder if things would have been different if I had intervened sooner, if I had stood up to Natalie and protected Lydia from her sister's malice. But I can't change the past. All I can do now is fight for justice, to make sure that Natalie pays for what she's done. With a heavy heart, I gather the evidence and head to the police station. I recount Lydia's struggles and Natalie's manipulations, watching as the detectives' faces grow grim with each revelation. They assure me that they will investigate thoroughly, that they will leave no stone unturned in their quest for the truth. As I leave the station, I feel a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. Lydia may be gone, but her memory lives on, and I will do everything in my power to ensure that her story is told. I will expose Natalie's crimes and bring her to justice, no matter the cost. For Lydia, for the daughter I lost, I will fight. I will be the voice she can no longer raise, the strength she can no longer muster. I will make things right, even if it means tearing our family apart. Natalie may have shattered our lives, but I will pick up the pieces and rebuild, one painful step at a time. The call comes in the middle of the night, jolting me from a restless sleep. It's the police, and the news they bring is like a punch to the gut. Lydia, my beautiful, vibrant daughter, is dead. An overdose, they say, but something in the detective's voice tells me there's more to the story. I can barely process the information as I stumble through the motions of planning Lydia's funeral. The grief is overwhelming, but it's the questions that keep me up at night. How did Lydia, who had always been so full of life, fall victim to drugs? And why, even in death, does Natalie seem so unnervingly calm? I try to push my suspicions aside, but they gnaw at me, refusing to be silenced. It's not until the funeral, when Natalie throws that flash drive into Lydia's coffin, that I know I can no longer ignore the truth. There's something sinister at play, and I'm determined to uncover it. As soon as the service ends, I corner Natalie, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and anger. What was on that flash drive, Natalie? What are you hiding? Natalie's eyes narrow, her lips curling into a sneer. You just can't let it go, can you, Mother? Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Lydia is dead, I snap, my hands balling into fists. And you're acting like it's just another day at the office. What did you do, Natalie? What did you do to your sister? For a moment, Natalie's mask slips, and I catch a glimpse of the darkness lurking beneath. Lydia got what she deserved, she hisses, her voice dripping with venom. She was weak, pathetic. She never had what it takes to succeed in this world. Not like me. I reel back, stunned by the callousness of her words. How can you say that? She was your sister, Natalie. She loved you. Natalie scoffs, rolling her eyes. Love? What good is love in this world, Mother? Power, control, that's what matters. And Lydia? She was nothing more than a pawn in my game. The pieces start to fall into place, and a wave of nausea washes over me. The scheme, I whisper, my voice trembling. The one you forced her into. That's what this is about, isn't it? Natalie's smile is cruel, triumphant. Poor, naive Lydia. She was so desperate to prove herself, to show that she could make it on her own. It was almost too easy to manipulate her, to make her dance to my tune. Rage boils up inside me, and I lunge forward, my hands reaching for Natalie's throat. But she's too quick. sidestepping my attack with a mocking laugh. "Careful, mother," she taunts, wagging her finger. "You wouldn't want to do anything you'll regret." I'm shaking, tears streaming down my face as I glare at the monster I once called my daughter. "This isn't over, Natalie," I spit, my voice raw with emotion. "I will find out what you did, and I will make you pay." I swear it on Lydia's grave. Natalie's eyes glitter with malice, her smile sharp as a knife. "Good luck with that, mother. You have no idea who you're dealing with." With that, she turns on her heel and stalks away, leaving me alone in the empty church, my heart shattered beyond repair. But even as the grief threatens to consume me, I feel a flicker of determination spark to life in my chest. Natalie may think she's untouchable, but she's underestimated the power of a mother's love. I will uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I will expose Natalie's crimes and bring her to justice. For Lydia, for the daughter I lost, I will fight, and I will not rest until the truth is revealed, and Natalie pays for what she's done. The contents of the flash drive are worse than I could have ever imagined. Emails, photos, and documents paint a picture of deceit and betrayal so vile, it makes my stomach churn. Natalie, my own daughter, orchestrated a web of lies and manipulation that led to Lydia's downfall. I pore over Lydia's journal entries, each word a knife to my heart. She writes of Natalie's constant belittling, the way she made her feel small and worthless. But it's the entries about the scheme that break me. Lydia's words are filled with desperation, a frantic need to prove herself to Natalie. She talks about the pressure Natalie put on her, the way she convinced her that this was her only chance to make something of herself. And then the devastating realization that it was all a lie. The scheme was a fraud, a way for Natalie to line her own pockets at the expense of her sister's dreams. Lydia's entries become more and more frantic as she realizes the depth of Natalie's betrayal. She's in too deep, and she doesn't know how to get out. I can barely see through my tears as I read the final entry, dated just days before Lydia's death. "I can't do this anymore," she writes, her handwriting shaky and uneven. "Natalie has ruined everything. She's taken my dreams, my future, and now she's taking my life. I don't know how to escape this hell she's created for me." Anger burns through my veins, white-hot and all-consuming. How could Natalie do this to her own sister? How could she be so cruel, so heartless? I know I can't let this stand. I have to make Natalie pay for what she's done, but I also know I can't do it alone. With shaking hands, I gather the evidence and head to the police station. I tell them everything, from the moment Natalie first approached Lydia with the scheme to the final, devastating entry in her journal. The detectives listen intently, their faces growing grimmer with each revelation. They ask me questions, probing for more details, and I answer as best I can. It's painful, reliving every moment of Lydia's suffering, but I know I have to do it, for her. When I'm finished, the lead detective leans back in his chair, his eyes hard and determined. "We'll investigate this thoroughly, Mrs. Novak," he promises. "If what you're saying is true, your daughter Natalie will face serious consequences." I nod, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. "There's one more thing," I say, my voice trembling. "I think Natalie may have had something to do with Lydia's death. The timing, the circumstances, it's too coincidental." The detective's eyebrows shoot up, and he leans forward, his voice urgent. "What makes you say that?" I take a deep breath, steeling myself. Lydia's journal. She wrote about Natalie, supplying her with drugs. I think she may have given her the dose that killed her. The detective's face hardens, and he nods grimly. "We'll look into it, Mrs. Novak. I promise you, we'll get to the bottom of this." As I leave the station, I feel a weight lift from my shoulders. I know the road ahead will be long and painful, but I also know I'm not alone. The truth is on my side, and I will stop at nothing to see justice served. Natalie may have shattered our family, but she underestimated the power of a mother's love. I will fight for Lydia, for the life she should have had, and I will not rest until Natalie pays for her sins. The evidence weighs heavy in my hands as I walk into the police station, a sense of purpose driving my every step. The detectives greet me with grim faces, their eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and determination. They know the gravity of what I'm about to share. I lay out the emails, photos, and journal entries, watching as their expressions shift from shock to disgust. They pore over the documents, piecing together the puzzle of Natalie's deceit. With each new revelation, their resolve grows stronger. Detective Becker, the lead investigator, looks up at me, his voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Novak, I know this must be incredibly difficult for you, but I promise you we will do everything in our power to bring Natalie to justice." I nod, my throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, Detective. I can't believe she could do this to her own sister, to our family." Detective Becker's eyes are filled with understanding. "Sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the greatest betrayal, but that doesn't make it your fault, Mrs. Novak. You couldn't have known." His words are a small comfort, but the guilt still gnaws at me. If only I had seen the signs earlier. If only I had protected Lydia from Natalie's machinations. I push the thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. "What happens now, Detective?" Detective Becker leans forward, his voice low and serious. "We'll bring Natalie in for questioning. With the evidence you've provided, we have enough to charge her with fraud and conspiracy. And if we can prove she supplied Lydia with the drugs that killed her..." He trails off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. My heart clenches at the thought, but I know it's a possibility I can't ignore. "Do what you need to do, Detective. I want the truth, no matter how painful it may be." Detective Becker nods, his expression grim. "We'll keep you informed every step of the way, Mrs. Novak. You have my word." As I leave the station, I feel a sense of purpose settle over me. Natalie may have destroyed Lydia's life, but I won't let her get away with it. I'll see this through to the end, no matter the cost. The days that follow are a blur of interviews and investigations. The detectives work tirelessly, piecing together the evidence and building their case against Natalie, and with each new development, the truth becomes clearer and more horrifying. Natalie's jealousy and resentment had festered for years, turning into a twisted obsession with power and control. She had manipulated Lydia, exploiting her vulnerabilities and dreams, all for her own gain. And when Lydia had tried to break free, Natalie had taken the ultimate revenge. The final piece of the puzzle falls into place when the toxicology report comes back, confirming my worst fears. The drugs in Lydia's system were a lethal combination, one that could only have been supplied by someone with access and knowledge. Someone like Natalie. I feel a wave of nausea wash over me as the reality sinks in. My own daughter, a murderer. The betrayal cuts deep, leaving me raw and bleeding. But even in the depths of my despair, I feel a flicker of hope. The truth is out there now, and Natalie will have to face the consequences of her actions. Justice will be served, and Lydia will finally be able to rest in peace. I steel myself for the battle ahead, knowing that it won't be easy. Natalie is cunning and ruthless, and she won't go down without a fight, but I'm ready to face her, to look her in the eye and make her answer for what she's done. For Lydia, for the daughter I lost, I will be strong. I will be the voice she can no longer raise, the justice she can no longer seek. And I will not rest until Natalie pays for her sins, no matter the price. The day of reckoning arrives, and I find myself standing outside Natalie's law firm, my heart pounding in my chest. Detective Becker and his team are by my side, their faces set with determination. We're here to confront Natalie, to make her answer for her crimes. As we enter the building, I feel a sense of unease wash over me. The sleek, modern interior feels cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. We make our way to Natalie's office, the sound of our footsteps echoing through the halls. Natalie looks up as we enter, her eyes widening in surprise. But the shock quickly fades, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "Mother," she says, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What brings you here?" Detective Becker steps forward, his voice firm and authoritative. "Natalie Novak, we have evidence linking you to the illegal scheme that defrauded your sister and ultimately led to her death. We also have reason to believe you supplied her with the drugs that killed her." Natalie's face twists into a sneer, her true colors finally showing. "You can't prove anything," she hisses, her eyes darting between us. "Lydia was a drug addict. She did this to herself." I feel a surge of anger course through me, and I step forward, my voice shaking with emotion. "How dare you?" I spit, my hands clenched into fists. "Lydia was your sister. She loved you, and you destroyed her. You manipulated her, lied to her, and then you killed her." Natalie laughs, a harsh, grating sound that sends shivers down my spine. Oh, please. Lydia was weak. She was always holding me back with her silly dreams and her pathetic art. She got what she deserved. Detective Becker's face hardens and he motions to his team. Natalie Novak, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and murder. You have the right to remain silent. As the detectives move in, Natalie's facade finally cracks. She lunges forward, her face contorted with rage. You can't do this to me, she screams, her voice echoing off the walls. I'm untouchable. I'm the one with the power here. But the detectives are quick, and they restrain her, snapping handcuffs around her wrists. Natalie thrashes and screams, her carefully crafted persona shattering before our eyes. You did this to yourself, Natalie, I say, my voice cold and hard. You let your jealousy and greed consume you, and now you'll pay the price. As the detectives lead her away, Natalie's eyes lock with mine, and for a moment I see a flicker of the girl she once was. The sister who played with Lydia, who laughed and dreamed and loved. But it's gone in an instant, replaced by a hatred so deep it takes my breath away. This isn't over, Mother, her voice dripping with venom. I'll make you pay for this. I'll make you all pay. But her threats are empty now, and I watch as she's led out of the office, a shell of the woman she once was. The truth is out there now, and Natalie will face the consequences of her actions. As we leave the building, Detective Becker turns to me, his face softening. You did the right thing, Mrs. Novak. I know it couldn't have been easy but you helped bring a dangerous criminal to justice. I nod, feeling a sense of bittersweet relief wash over me. I just wish I could have done more, I whisper, my voice thick with emotion. I wish I could have saved Lydia. Detective Becker places a comforting hand on my shoulder, his eyes filled with understanding. You did everything you could, Mrs. Novak. Lydia would be proud of you. As we part ways, I feel a sense of purpose settle over me. Natalie may be in custody, but my fight is far from over. I'll make sure she pays for what she's done, and I'll honor Lydia's memory in every way I can. For my daughter, for the light she brought to this world, I will be strong. I will be the justice she deserves, no matter the cost. The interrogation room is cold and sterile, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on Natalie's face. She sits across from me, her wrists shackled, her eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and fear. Detective Becker is by my side, his presence a silent support. Why, Natalie? I ask, my voice trembling with emotion. Why did you do this to your own sister? Natalie's lips curl into a sneer, her voice dripping with disdain. You always favored her, didn't you? Perfect little Lydia, with her art and her dreams. You never saw me, never appreciated what I could do. I feel a surge of anger course through me, and I lean forward, my eyes locked with hers. I loved you both, Natalie. I wanted nothing more than for you to be happy, to find your own path in life, but you let your jealousy consume you, and look where it's led you. Natalie scoffs, rolling her eyes. Spare me the lecture, Mother. You have no idea what it was like living in Lydia's shadow. She had everything handed to her while I had to fight for every scrap of recognition. Detective Becker clears his throat, his voice firm and steady. Miss Novak, we have evidence that you manipulated your sister into participating in an illegal scheme. We also have reason to believe you supplied her with the drugs that ultimately led to her death. Do you have anything to say for yourself? For a moment, Natalie's facade cracks, and I see a flicker of fear in her eyes. But it's gone just as quickly, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. You have no proof, she hisses, her voice low and venomous. It's all circumstantial. No jury will convict me. I feel a wave of disgust wash over me, and I shake my head in disbelief. How can you be so callous, Natalie? Your sister is dead because of you. Do you feel no remorse, no guilt? Natalie's eyes narrow, and she leans forward, her voice a low, menacing whisper. Guilt? Why should I feel guilty? Lydia was weak, pathetic. She didn't have the strength to survive in this world. I did what I had to do to get ahead, and if she couldn't keep up, that's her problem. I reel back, stunned by the depths of Natalie's cruelty. Detective Becker places a hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. Mrs. Novak, I think it's time we let the evidence speak for itself. He nods to the officer standing guard, who steps forward with a thick file in hand. Natalie Novak, we have evidence linking you to the fraudulent scheme, including emails, bank records, and witness statements. We also have the toxicology report confirming that the drugs found in Lydia's system were a direct match to those you supplied her with. Natalie's face pales, and for the first time, I see a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. That's not possible, she stammers, her voice losing its edge. I was careful. I covered my tracks. Detective Becker shakes his head, a grim smile on his face. Not well enough, Ms. Novak. We have everything we need to bring charges against you. It's over. Natalie slumps back in her chair, her shoulders sagging in defeat. For a moment, I almost feel a flicker of pity for her. But then I remember Lydia, remember the life that was stolen from her, and my resolve hardens once more. I hope you rot in prison, Natalie, I say, my voice cold and hard. I hope you spend every day of your life haunted by what you've done. You may be my daughter, but you're no longer a part of this family. As the officers lead Natalie away, I feel a sense of bittersweet justice wash over me. Lydia's death will never be undone, but at least now her killer will face the consequences of her actions. I turn to Detective Becker, my eyes filled with tears. Thank you, I whisper, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you for helping me bring Lydia justice. He nods, his face softening with compassion. It's my job, Mrs. Novak, but more than that, it's the right thing to do. Your daughter deserved better, and now she can finally rest in peace. As I leave the station, I feel a sense of purpose settle over me. Natalie may be gone, but Lydia's memory will live on. I'll make sure of it, no matter the cost. The courtroom is packed, the air heavy with anticipation as the judge takes her seat. Natalie sits at the defendant's table, her face a mask of cold indifference. I watch her from the gallery, my heart heavy with a mixture of grief and anger. The prosecutor stands, his voice ringing out clear and strong as he presents the case against Natalie. He lays out the evidence piece by piece, painting a picture of greed, jealousy, and ultimately murder. With each revelation, the courtroom grows more and more silent, the weight of Natalie's crimes hanging heavy in the air. When it's Natalie's turn to speak, she rises from her seat, her head held high. But as she begins to spin her web of lies and excuses, I feel a surge of disgust wash over me. How can she stand there so unrepentant, so unashamed of what she's done? But the jury sees through her facade, and when the verdict is read, the courtroom erupts in a chorus of gasps and murmurs. Guilty on all counts. Natalie's face twists with rage, and for a moment I fear she might lash out. But the bailiffs are quick to restrain her, and she's led away in handcuffs, her screams of protest echoing through the halls. As the courtroom empties, I feel a sense of hollow victory wash over me. Justice has been served, but at what cost? My daughters are gone, one to death and the other to prison. Our family is shattered, broken beyond repair. I make my way to Lydia's studio, the place where she once poured her heart and soul into her art. The room is just as she left it, a testament to the life she'll never get to live. As I wander through the space, my eyes fall on a series of paintings tucked away in the corner. I pull them out, my breath catching in my throat as I take in the images before me. They're portraits of our family, rendered in Lydia's signature style. But it's not the technical skill that strikes me. It's the love and warmth that radiates from each brushstroke. There's a painting of Lydia and Natalie as children, their arms wrapped around each other, their faces split in identical grins. Another shows the four of us gathered around the dinner table, laughing and talking, a perfect snapshot of happier times. As I stare at the paintings, I feel a sudden rush of emotion wash over me. Lydia may be gone, but her love, her spirit, lives on in these images. She captured the best of us, the moments of joy and togetherness that defined our family. I know then, with a sudden clarity, what I must do. I'll honor Lydia's memory, not just by seeking justice for her death, but by celebrating her life. I'll take these paintings and I'll share them with the world. I'll let them see the beauty and the talent that was taken from us too soon. I'll open a gallery in Lydia's name, a place where her art can live on and inspire others. It won't bring her back, but it will ensure that her legacy endures, that her light continues to shine. As I gather up the paintings, I feel a sense of purpose wash over me. This is how I'll keep Lydia's memory alive, how I'll find meaning in the face of such senseless tragedy. Natalie may have taken my daughter from me, but she can't take away the love and the pride I feel for her. I step out of the studio, the paintings clutched to my chest, and I feel a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead won't be easy, but I know now that I'm not alone. Lydia's spirit will guide me, will give me the strength to keep going, no matter what lies ahead. And so I begin, one step at a time, to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. I'll build something new from the ruins, something beautiful and strong, just like my Lydia. And in doing so, I'll find a way to heal, to honor the daughter I lost, and to keep her memory alive, now and forever.